My sister was the type to use justice as a weapon against others. She asked why I wasn't eating the sweets our aunt so kindly brought. She called me awful, claiming our aunt would be terribly sad. I simply suggested that if she was so concerned, she should eat them. In response, my sister crossed her arms and fell into a pouting silence. She only tried to make me eat them because she didn't want them herself. She always manipulated people with guilt, pretending to be righteous. This is why I decided I had to live a life completely separate from her. From the passenger seat, she let out a lazy, exasperated sigh. She whined, asking if we had arrived at our destination yet. I gripped the wheel, telling her to be quiet as I'd already answered. We arrived at the temporary parking lot for the fireworks festival. As I opened the trunk, she stretched and complained about being tired. I took stock of our supplies, noting the bento boxes and drinks. A sly, opportunistic smile spread across her face. She asked which cooler held the alcohol, offering to carry the heaviest one. My friend gave me a knowing pat, aware of her manipulative trick. She waved goodbye, announcing they would go ahead to secure a spot. I was left alone, stuck with the bulk of the luggage. I sighed, thinking at least she carried one thing, which was better than nothing. I steeled myself, knowing I had finally made it this far. Next year, I would go to college far away and finally be free of her. In that instant, a horrific tearing sound was followed by a scream. My face was a mask of pure, uncomprehending shock. I found myself in a forest, wondering where the parking lot had gone. What? This was the parking lot? I murmured in total disbelief. I was carrying our supplies, but the car had completely vanished. I looked up at the unfamiliar trees, hearing only the sounds of birds. I wondered if I had come camping, or if this was all just a dream. I desperately checked my phone, only to find there was no signal. I told myself to calm down. I could find a town if I just walked. With a deep breath, I began my trek into the dense, silent woods. My path soon led me to a small, clear stream sparkling in the sun. I sat by its bank, remarking on how clean and beautiful the water was. I decided to follow the river a little further downstream. The stream opened up to reveal a vast, windswept coastline. I stood panting from the long walk, shocked to be looking at the sea. I had walked for so long without seeing anyone. How could this be? A loud growl from my stomach cut through my bewildered thoughts. I was relieved to find the cooler box, filled with drinks and bento. Sitting on the rocky shore, I began to eat, grounding myself. I noticed the beach was pristine, with no plastic waste to be seen. I realized with a grim certainty that I had to prepare to spend the night. The sun began to dip below the horizon, casting long shadows. I used pliers from our kit to methodically strip bark from driftwood. I was glad for the supplies my sister had inadvertently made me bring. I recalled watching survival shows, my only guide in this new reality. I began the grueling work of starting a fire with a bow drill. The unfamiliar labor was exhausting, my body straining with the effort. My hands began to ache and tremble, my strength quickly fading. I knew I had to race against the setting sun and get a fire going. Just as I was about to give up, a thin wisp of smoke appeared. "Smoke's coming out!" I cried, renewed with a surge of desperate hope. I gently blew on the precious ember, carefully nurturing the flame. The fire finally caught. I knew I had to protect it with my life. The dark forest closed in around me under a canopy of stars. The campfire crackled, a small beacon of light in the immense dark. Exhausted, I lay down, grateful for the warmth of my jacket. I drifted into a deep sleep, telling myself it would all be okay. I clung to the hope that when I awoke, this would all be a dream. Morning arrived with the cheerful sound of birdsong in the trees. I awoke with a start, my head still resting on my backpack. The sight of the smoldering campfire confirmed my worst fear. It was real. I gasped in panic, seeing the precious fire was about to go out. I quickly added more wood, sighing with relief that it was a close call. I decided to head in the opposite direction from yesterday to find help. I needed more firewood, scratching at the itchy insect bites on my arm. I pushed through the dense undergrowth, my resolve hardening. Suddenly I stopped, my eyes wide. This is, I thought, stunned. I had emerged onto a high cliff overlooking an endless, empty ocean. The crushing realization hit me. I was trapped on a deserted island. I could see no mainland, only other small islands in the distance. A rustling in the bushes behind me made me spin around. "Who's there?" I sat and listened intently, looking back towards the forest. A pair of legs emerged from the trees. "Why?" I whispered to myself. Why was this happening to me? I was only here because of my sister. I never even wanted to go to the fireworks, and now I was stranded here. I wondered why I had bothered with the fire. Oh, right. To survive. I stood with a vacant expression. the weight of it all pressing down. My search for a way out led me to a beautiful, cascading waterfall. I was amazed that such a beautiful place could exist on this island. Seeing bubbles in the pool, I realized I had found a source of water. I noted that this new strategic location was close to my first camp. A small smile touched my lips as I wondered if my luck was changing. I decided to move my camp here, where smoke might be seen by a ship. Realizing this would be a long ordeal, I began sawing logs for a shelter. I panted with exertion as I hauled the heavy logs through the woods. I decided to build a proper home, hammering sharpened stakes into the ground. I drove a post deep into the earth, thinking it should be sturdy enough. I worried about the structure's strength, deciding to add more pillars. I ate a quiet meal by a small fire inside my half-finished hut. I looked at my last bento, knowing I had to find a new food source. A sudden noise from the bushes outside made me jump with alarm. I peeked out from my shelter, sensing the presence of a nearby beast. I thought it might be a boar or a rabbit and resolved to finish the walls. Lying exhausted on my makeshift bed, I longed for a simple bath. Another morning dawned, the sky filled with the sound of birds. To my delight, I discovered a river teeming with schools of fish. Wading into the cool water, I splashed as I tried to catch one. I held my prize aloft with a wide, triumphant grin. "All right!" He wades into the shallow river, realizing the fish are surprisingly easy to catch. His first catch sizzles and crackles as it roasts over a hastily built fire. He takes a large, satisfying bite, his first real meal in this new world. Chewing thoughtfully, he sits in his shelter, wishing he had salt for flavor. He decides to start drinking spring water to conserve his remaining bottled drinks. Drifting off to sleep, he resolves to work hard on his house tomorrow. He kneels, digging a trench around his hut to protect it from the rain. He painstakingly plasters the wooden frame of his shelter with thick, wet mud. Wiping his brow, he is proud of the steady progress he has made. He plans the roof, deciding to use a vinyl sheet for a makeshift window. The dense forest canopy offers plenty of branches and leaves for his roof. He builds a fire in a stone-lined hearth to channel warmth into his hut. He sits inside, satisfied that he has managed to build a rainproof shelter. He feels the gentle heat from the stones, a good defense against the cold nights. A new ambitious idea forms in his mind. He will build a bath next. He surveys the small stone pool he built, thinking it will be sufficient. Using long sticks as tongs, he lifts a superheated rock from the fire. He yelps as the hot stone shatters upon hitting the cold water. He makes a mental note to be more careful with the fragile, heated rocks. He sinks into the steaming water with a deep, blissful sigh of contentment. As he relaxes, he dreams of making stew, tired of plain grilled fish. He notices the autumn leaves, a clear sign that the seasons are changing. He shivers in the bath, realizing the air is getting colder with time. His handmade earthenware pot bubbles merrily over the crackling campfire. He sips his stew, wishing for more knowledge to expand his limited diet. The once vibrant forest begins to fade as winter's chill sets in. He stands before his completed hut, a sturdy monument to his own survival. He smiles proudly, thinking that, while it can be improved, it is a success. He looks up to see that snow has already blanketed the distant mountain peak. He trudges through the first snowfall, the biting cold a serious new threat. He spots some mushrooms growing on a log, but he is unsure if they are safe. He wisely decides against eating them, knowing the risk is far too great. Night falls on his lonely hut, a single point of life in the wilderness. The sharp sound of him chopping firewood echoes in the silent, cold air. Huddled inside, he focuses on keeping the small fire alive against the cold. His breath plumes in the air as he realizes snow will soon fall here. He worries as fish become scarcer, thinking about his dwindling food stores. He wonders how much longer he can keep going, how long he can survive. A sudden noise from within his hut makes his eyes widen in alarm. A brilliant streak of light flashes through the darkness of his small shelter. He sits by the dying embers, startled by the sudden, unexplained phenomenon. A chilling thought crosses his mind. Is he finally going to die here? He hugs his knees, overwhelmed by the crushing weight of his utter loneliness. A zipping orb of light appears, its high-pitched voice screaming frantic apologies. He flinches back, bewildered as the light circles him, apologizing for his predicament. The orb of light announces that he was caught up in a hero summoning. It then tells him that this is no longer the world that he knows. He can only stare in utter shock, his mind unable to process the words. The orb repeats its impossible message, confirming his terrifying new reality. He questions the orb, asking if he was really just collateral damage. He grabs at the light, demanding to be sent back, but it says it cannot. The orb explains the summoning was meant for those on the verge of death. He struggles to understand, repeating that this cannot be his own world. He demands to know what this place is, his face a mask of confusion. The orb shows him a vision of a fantasy world, asking if this is it. He argues that he's seen no monsters, then asks if it's a spirit. The spirit explains it was once a god before the summoning drained its power. It boasts that its power returned quickly, despite its current weakened state. The spirit explains the summoning's purpose was to briefly connect the two worlds. It rambles about complex concepts of deification, leaving him utterly confused. The spirit reveals the hero candidates were 3 humans about to die. It apologizes again, saying it didn't notice he was caught up with them. He shouts in disbelief, realizing the summoned hero is his manipulative older sister. The grim truth dawns on him. He must have been about to die too. He thinks back, realizing the human world itself had been in some kind of trouble. Suddenly, a group of powerful, divine-looking beings appears before him. He finds himself surrounded by a pantheon of gods, their presence overwhelming. The small orb panics, begging one of the gods not to reveal a secret. The god, Vafan, sternly tells the panicked orb that it is too late. Vafan decides to deal with the boy's fate later, ignoring the orb's pleas. The young goddess, Mishut, approaches him as the orb transforms into a wolf. The spirit explains that Rish failed, causing the summoning to expand its range. He blames the spirit for the mistake, but it quickly denies responsibility. Vafan glares, silencing their bickering and telling them to deal with it later. The old goddess, Val, asks him which of the assembled deities he will choose. Vafan explains he must choose a patron god to survive in this new world. They will grant him powers and tools from his remaining lifespan. Vafan introduces himself as the god of power, fire, destruction, and rebirth. The same dark-haired man introduces himself as Roardale, of earth, silence, and magic. The old man with a long white beard is Gackle, of order and magic. A serious young boy introduces himself as Ishu, of water and healing. The kind-faced old woman is Val, goddess of the earth and its harvest. The cheerful young girl, Mishut, introduces herself as goddess of light and wind. The beautiful blonde, Haralfa, is the goddess of light, love, and beauty. Haralfa explains that Rish, the wolf, has lost almost all of its power. He glares at the weakened spirit, annoyed at its previous overconfidence. He asks if the powers of the various gods overlap with each other. Vafan explains that many beings came, but only the strongest are present. He ponders the difficult question: which of these powerful gods should he choose? He looks at the assembled gods, wondering if he has to choose all of them. Gal explains that choosing everyone would cause their powers to weaken each other. He notes that since the gods don't get along, cooperation is unlikely. The strength of the blessing he receives depends on his compatibility with the god. Mishut explains how the relationship, love, friendship, or obsession affects the power. He is completely lost, unable to keep up with the complex divine rules. Gal advises him to think about what he wants to achieve in this world. He wonders to himself, what is it that he truly wants to accomplish? He wants to live a comfortable life, free from any unwanted obligations. His most fervent wish is to have absolutely nothing to do with his sister. He also desires the power to travel this new world freely and unhindered. Mishut explains his sister's strong sense of justice, which he knows she weaponizes. Gali clarifies that his own power will grow only when his sister is active. He frantically asks what kind of abilities his sister received from the gods. Learning she has all magic and domination, he feels a deep sense of dread. Seeing his desperation, the god Gakkle prepares to grant him a suitable power. Gali lists a host of skills ending with severance and the ominous hero slayer. He processes the terrifying name, but ultimately accepts the god's offer. The group stands in the quiet, dark forest under a starry sky. Gal presents him with a magnificent decapitation sword, essential for his survival. The god Vafan gives him a heavy pouch of gold for his new life. Mishut offers a small bag containing a powder that will accelerate plant growth. Gali feels he should be the one expressing gratitude for the boy's understanding. The small wolf spirit, Rish, sleeps peacefully in the snow, its body twitching. He asks the gods if he can take the vulnerable little wolf with him. He explains that since Rish is powerless, he will be the one to protect it. He gently strokes the sleeping wolf, telling it he's happy to have it. The spirit lets out a soft, assenting sound, accepting its new master. Vafan begins the transfer, warning him to be careful with his new abilities. Arriving before a grand manor, he vows to live a peaceful, comfortable life. He looks around at the vast, snowy landscape, awestruck by its sheer beauty. The manor is nestled in a valley with a small village in the distance. He marvels at the beautiful scenery and the surprisingly warm air despite the snow. He thinks to himself that this is less a house and more of a mansion. He catches his reflection in a mirror and is shocked by his new younger face. Cradling Rish, he stares in disbelief, wondering what happened to his face. He blushes, realizing the gods chose his new appearance from 3 youthful options. He cautiously peeks around a corner, still processing the sudden changes to his body. Stepping into the entrance hall, he is impressed by the fine stone floors. A grand staircase with a wooden banister leads to the upper floors of the manor. The living room is well appointed, with a fireplace and a plush, tufted armchair. The kitchen is rustic but fully equipped with a large brick oven and countertops. He stands in a spacious library, commenting on the impressive size of the room. He peeks into another room, wondering what else this grand house holds. He discovers a massive pantry, its shelves packed with food, and is left speechless. Holding Rish, he identifies familiar foods, feeling as though he is in a dream. He finds a large wooden barrel filled with live trout and salmon swimming inside. The familiar fish make him wonder if there is some connection to his old world. His stomach growls loudly after seeing so much food after months of starvation. Looking at his grimy hands, he decides he must take a bath before he eats. He sinks into the hot steaming water of a clawfoot tub with a deep sigh. Submerged in the warmth, he feels a profound sense of happiness and peace. He wonders how to polish rice and decides to test out his new divine skills. Now dressed, he stands before a large wooden watermill, ready to work. He focuses his gaze, activating his powerful appraisal skill for the first time. He instantly understands the mill's mechanics, amazed by his newfound knowledge. The heavy wooden mill begins to grind, its weight pressing down on the grain. He finds Rish sleeping soundly in a wicker basket he prepared for the spirit. He recalls that Rish gave itself to him, and he will sustain it with his power. He gently pets the sleeping wolf, promising to feed it meat once it recovers. In the kitchen, he skillfully slices a head of cabbage into fine, thin slivers. He generously seasons a thick cut of sirloin steak with freshly ground pepper. The seasoned steak hits the hot pan with a satisfying and loud sizzle. He expertly flips the steak, admitting it's a strange combination he craves. He reflects on his monotonous diet on the island, which consisted only of fish. He lifts the lid off a wooden pot, revealing perfectly steamed white rice. The finished meal is plated beautifully, sparkling with the promise of deliciousness. He puts his hands together, offering a sincere prayer of thanks for the food. He cuts into the thick, juicy steak with a knife and fork, ready to eat. He lifts the first perfect, juice-dripping bite of steak to his mouth. The flavor hits him, and he can only manage a single amazed word: delicious. He savors the juicy meat, fluffy rice, and crisp cabbage, a perfect combination. Sitting alone at the large table, he has a profound realization: he has survived. He sinks into the soft, comfortable bed, a luxury he hasn't known for months. As he drifts off, he's grateful to no longer fear his fire going out. He accepts his new reality, knowing he will now live in this unknown world. The next morning, he wakes up thinking the bed is almost too soft to sleep in. The sun rises over the roof of his new manor, beginning a new day. A week has passed, and he is hanging laundry out to dry in the yard. He spent most of the week sleeping, recovering from his harsh life on the island. Now feeling rested, he finishes his laundry with a satisfied smile. In the kitchen, his skills show him recipe options for various ingredients. He contemplates making ramen, a nostalgic dish from his old world. He has kelp, but realizes he has no way to grind the wheat into flour. He glances at the sacks of wheat, knowing he can't use them without milling them. A simple, comforting meal of grilled fish, soup, and rice sits on the table. He decides on the simple meal, enjoying the familiar and comforting flavors. He resolves to go shopping for containers to store flour once he mills it. He unfurls the large detailed map the gods gave him, planning his first trip. He scans the map, looking for the recommended area the gods had pointed out. Finding his destination, he activates his transference skill to travel there. He materializes on a hill, the walled city of Cassum laid out before him. He recognizes the frontier city of Cassum from the map and his gifted knowledge. He knows Cassum is a hub for adventurers who hunt monsters in the nearby forest. At the city gate, a guard asks him for his identification and a travel permit. He explains his situation, noticing the other adventurers staring at him. He wonders if his new clothes or divinely altered face are making him stand out. Wearing a new hooded cloak, he feels he can explore without drawing attention. He examines some rough-spun cloth at a market stall, noting its poor quality. In a general store, he browses the various goods available for purchase. He finds some items he needs, thinking of his companion, Rish, as he shops. He clutches his pouch of money, knowing it's a considerable sum from the gods. His attention is caught by a strangely shaped ornate bottle on a nearby shelf. He recognizes the elegant bottle as a potion, a common item in video games. He decides to use his appraisal skill to learn about its ingredients. He walks past a food stall, curious about the cuisine of this new world. Using appraisal on sausages reveals a vision of bacteria, making him recoil. He is startled by the sight of a ladle being used at a nearby stall. He spots a shop with a magnificent grape trellis, deciding to look for farm tools. He approaches the shopkeeper, asking to purchase a pitchfork he sees in a crate. He asks the woman if he can also take a small cutting from the grapevine. His shopping nearly complete, he now sought a weapon shop. A kind shopkeeper noted his new face, suggesting he buy leather armor. He imagined metal armor in the summer heat and quickly decided against it. He smiled and warmly thanked the old woman for her helpful advice. Entering the weapon shop felt like stepping into a video game world. He drew his own blade, deciding it was the easiest to swing. Appraising the other weapons was too confusing, so he stuck with his own. He purchased goat monster leather armor, a pouch, and a large sack. As dust settled over the town, he felt the day's exhaustion. He rested near the gate, deciding against using transference in public. It was time to return to his manor, drop off his gear, and check on Rish. Under a starry sky, he resolved to visit the Adventurers Guild tomorrow. The next day, he stood before the large, timber-framed guild hall. Inside the bustling tavern, he approached the counter to register. The receptionist explained the registration options, and he chose to pay the fee. As she prepared his tag, he mentioned he also had a request. While waiting, he pulled a thick, aged book from a nearby shelf. He began reading about the Forest of Monsters, a valuable resource. It detailed the local topography and how to utilize monster parts. A cheerful "yo" interrupted his reading as a figure approached. A burly adventurer asked if he was the one seeking an escort mission. He explained he was a novice hoping to learn from a safe party. The man Dean, a silver rank adventurer, introduced himself as his guide. The protagonist was surprised a silver ranker would take such a simple quest. He was swept up in the moment, agreeing to the day's arrangement. He realized he was being completely carried along by Dean's forceful energy. A girl with twin tails stormed over, telling Dean not to decide things alone. Dean casually dismissed her complaints, telling her not to be picky. The protagonist felt annoyed, sensing the guild favored tedious noble quests. He tried to tell them he didn't want to get involved in their drama. The girl argued with Dean about their partner Chris getting all the good jobs. She shot the protagonist a pleading look from the side. Dean complained that he didn't want to be tied down to the guild. He stood with arms crossed, not wanting to be fixed to one partner. The girl, Emil, leaned in, asking sweetly for his cooperation. She explained they were siblings and he was being too indulgent. Another girl, Kaina, appeared, calling out Emil's name in exasperation. Kaina calmly told Dean this was the consequence of spoiling his sister. She reminded him that he was free to refuse the guild's choice of escort. The protagonist apologized to Kaina for the embarrassing scene they were making. The word siblings triggered a negative reaction, reminding him of his sister. He told a stunned Dean that he was withdrawing his escort request. Emil, completely misunderstanding, beamed and thanked him profusely. She assumed he would find another party for her, which he quickly denied. He turned to the receptionist, stating he no longer needed the escort. Dean called out, shocked by his sudden change of plans. The receptionist apologized for the commotion and offered to return his fee. He asked if he could have the Adventurer's Handbook instead of a refund. He walked away from the guild, the building stark against the sky. Out in the street, he let out a weary sigh of relief. He resolved that in this world, he would not tolerate complicated sibling drama. A playful, ethereal voice whispered, asking why he wasn't using severance. The goddess Misha appeared, reminding him that only he could see her. She told him to be conscious of her and the other spirits watching him. He wondered if she was being simple, but she insisted he just be aware. She cheekily suggested he could think naughty thoughts, which he flatly denied. He considered that using his severance skill too often could be a problem. Misha explained that the skill's effect weakens over a wider area of targets. He wondered aloud if the power truly diminishes with more targets. She clarified that it affects those around the target, making them avoid the topic. She winked, telling him he was free to use it if he remembered that. He looked at her and quietly thanked her for the advice. She gave him a warm, contented smile, pleased to have helped. As she disappeared, a gentle gust of wind swirled in her place. He wondered if a god had taken an interest in him, despite his lack of power. He approached the city gate, ready to enter the Forest of Monsters alone. The guard checked his new adventurer's tag and waved him through. Leaving the safety of the city's high stone walls, he stepped into the wild. He consulted the handbook, which said monsters roam just outside the gate. He read that the creatures he would encounter were known to have horns. The book showed illustrations of both horned and hornless rabbits. Now that he was alone, he decided it was time to test his blade. He summoned his weapon, the name Decapitation Sword, echoing in his mind. He recalled his storage skill could hide anything except living creatures. A sudden rustling sound in the tall grass caught his attention. He turned to see a large white rabbit emerge from the brush. The rabbit froze, its nose twitching as it stared at him. He relaxed for a moment, assuming it was just an ordinary animal. Suddenly, the rabbit's expression turned vicious as it lunged toward him. "Whoa!" he cried, stumbling back from the creature's ferocious attack. He saw the dark, bean-sized horns around its eyes. He realized with a jolt that this was a hornless monster. He swung his sword on pure instinct, the blade connecting with a solid thwack. His eyes widened in shock at the effortless result of his strike. He had defeated the creature in a single clean swing. He wondered how a normal sword from the shop would have fared. Another rabbit fell just as easily to his blade. He realized that even a normal sword would have been enough for this horned foe. He looked out into the forest, a newfound confidence settling over him. He found some herbs and used his appraisal skill to identify them. Discovering wild raspberries, he was delighted by the forest's rich bounty. He thought happily to himself how incredibly useful his skills were. A swirl of magic by a tree trunk caught his eye. He recognized the mushrooms as the same kind he'd seen on the island. His appraisal skill confirmed they were edible, filling him with regret. A sudden intense feeling of dread washed over him, putting him on high alert. He sensed the presence of a monster, something far bigger than a rabbit. He whipped his head around, his face etched with shock. A massive, horned, bear-like creature growled at him from the trees. The horned bear reared up on its hind legs, letting out a terrifying roar. His eyes widened in shock, realizing he faced a large, horned monster. The dense forest canopy towered over the scene below. He looked around the clearing, still processing what had just happened. He stared at the fallen bear, awed by his sword's terrifying power. Suddenly, the goddess Mishit appeared, asking why he wasn't using magic. He scolded her for the surprise, but she just giggled and apologized sweetly. He admitted he had forgotten about magic, feeling it was unnecessary anyway. Mishut suggested he try searching for monsters without needing to walk around. With a cheerful smile, she urged him to test his exploration ability. He realized he'd received so many abilities, he hadn't processed them all. Focusing his mind, he activated the exploration skill for the first time. A targeting reticle appeared in his vision, locking onto a distant rabbit. He ruefully thought how much easier things would have been using this sooner. Mishut asked what magic he'd use, prompting him to ask about attributes. She happily listed the divine elemental attributes now at his command. The targeted horned rabbit suddenly burst from the undergrowth, charging at him. He closed his eyes, concentrating and visualizing the spell he wanted to cast. Thrusting his hand forward, he unleashed a powerful wind-slash attack. The invisible blade of wind struck the rabbit, defeating it instantly. He stared at his hand in amazement, realizing the magic had worked. With the defeated rabbit nearby, he turned and thanked Mishut for her help. She advised him to be careful, as magic users were rare, then vanished. A small whirlwind appeared as he used his skill to store the carcasses. He decided to sell his haul after transferring near the city gate. He considered the practical problem of transporting his massive haul to the guild. He arrived at a large timber frame building that served as a purchasing center. He approached the counter and politely asked the man to appraise his goods. The shopkeeper was utterly shocked as he dropped the enormous sack of kills. The man remarked on his incredible strength, so unfitting for his appearance. He thought about how he had neatly butchered the creatures before bringing them. The shopkeeper led him into a back room filled with hanging monster carcasses. He knew his mental resistance skill made this gruesome sight bearable. He recalled how just gutting fish on the island had been his limit. The man praised his excellent arm strength and clean processing of the hides. He declined going to the Adventurers Guild, despite the offer of more money. A dark expression crossed his face as he remembered the chaotic adventurer siblings. He then asked the shopkeeper where he might learn how to make potions. The man explained the guild system and offered to sell him a recipe directly. The boy agreed to the deal, understanding the man's offer. He held the newly acquired potion recipe, written in an unfamiliar script. He was amazed that recipes for everything from court cuisine were available. Looking over the instructions, he thought making potions seemed surprisingly simple. He decided making potions was a good way to hide his healing abilities. Shopkeeper called out to him just as he was preparing to leave. The man asked if he had found a magic stone, offering to appraise it. His eyes widened in realization, recalling the mention of magic stones. The man held the small, sparkling red gem, the crystallized spirit of a monster. He identified it as a valuable red spinel, congratulating him on the find. The boy, who thought it was just a pebble, gave a bewildered thanks. The man offered to buy it, noting its potential for powerful fire magic. He quickly agreed to sell, since he could use magic without it. As dusk fell, the half-timbered buildings of Cassum were cast in shadow. He decided to explore the town and get a bite to eat before nightfall. He wandered through the streets, taking in the unfamiliar sights and sounds. He found himself in a bustling evening market, alive with activity. His eyes were drawn to stalls piled high with wheels of cheese. Other vendors offered cured salamis and long strings of plump sausages. He saw hearty sandwiches stuffed with what looked like shredded cabbage. He observed that bread with sauerkraut, sausage, ham, and cheese was common. He used his appraisal skill on some sizzling sausages on a grill. He decided they looked well cooked and ordered one from the vendor. He took a large, satisfying bite of the hot grilled sausage. He mused that the greasy, high-calorie food was perfect for adventurers. His attention was then caught by bins filled with various dried fruits. Curious, he bought a small bag and popped a piece into his mouth. He recoiled in shock, exclaiming at how incredibly sour it was. He realized it was probably an ingredient for sweets or savory meat dishes. He noticed a woman at another stall selling what looked like brown sugar. He was charmed by the retro look of the balance scale she used. The rich smell of alcohol made him wonder what the legal drinking age was. He continued his walk through the lively market, feeling a simple joy. A commotion up ahead caught his attention, and he wondered what it was. He craned his neck, trying to get a look at the source of the excitement. He saw a massive, whole-roasted pig being cooked over a large fire pit. His eyes lit up with excitement at the impressive culinary display. He watched as the vendor expertly carved the succulent meat for sandwiches. He eagerly purchased one of the freshly made roast pork sandwiches. He held the thick sandwich, thinking how incredibly delicious it looked. He took a huge, enthusiastic bite, the flavors exploding in his mouth. Chewing happily, he declared that he had definitely found a winner. He savored the juicy pork and planned to roast one himself at home. He looked at the starry sky, deciding to get a pig later on. Later that night, his grand manor stood silently under the stars. He returned home, softly greeting the sleeping Rish curled in its basket. He reflected that his stomach had shrunk since his time on the island. He recounted his successful day of hunting and earning money to the spirit. Rish let out a soft, sleepy whimper in response to his voice. A soft, warm light emanated from his hand as he reached for Rish. He knew his healing magic was useless for Rish's magical exhaustion. He gently wished for the small, frail spirit to get well soon. As he prepared for bed, he bid his new peaceful home good night. The next morning arrived bright and clear, sunlight dappling the trees. He sat down to a simple, traditional breakfast of fish, rice, and soup. While eating, he mused that the cloth in Cassum was of poor quality. He decided he wanted to use his language skill to read local books. With a smile, he resolved to visit the royal capital that very day. Upon arrival, he was stunned by the immense size of the capital city. He approached the city guard, explaining it was his first time visiting. The guard kindly handed him a simple folded map of the city. The guard warned that the commercial guild might try to take advantage of him. A city guard mused that a wandering child in the plaza might offer directions. He thanked the guard, paying for a map of the magnificent royal capital. As he walked away, the guard called out to him one last time. The guard offered a specific, helpful tip for finding a guide in the city. Surprised by the kindness, Jean offered the guard another heartfelt thanks for his advice. He ventured into the capital, hoping to avoid any trouble in this new city. He noticed the city's architecture was cramped, with buildings pressed tightly together. Following the map, he finally arrived at the central plaza he was looking for. He recalled the guard's advice. Find a man named Leon by the well. He spotted a figure with a long ponytail sitting on the edge of the well. Cautiously, he approached the figure and asked if their name was indeed Leon. The person's hostile reaction made him jump back in surprise and fear. Leon shot him a sharp, menacing glare, his eyes filled with intense irritation. The man confirmed his name with a snap, his aggressive tone terrifying Jean. Utterly intimidated, he stammered his request for a tour of the city. He explained that a city guard had been the one to recommend him. Leon seemed even more annoyed to hear a guard had sent the boy. He wondered if he had been tricked or if this was the wrong person. With a heavy sigh, Leon reluctantly agreed, chalking it up to fate. Now walking together, Jean asked if there were any important sights to see. Leon suggested the view from the castle was the best in the capital. However, he quickly added that commoners were forbidden from entering the castle grounds. Jean was confused why he would recommend a place that was off limits. He then asked for recommendations for shops or places to eat instead. Leon's expression darkened as he mentioned needing to get to a famous restaurant. John couldn't understand why his simple questions made his guide so angry. They walked along the cobblestone streets, their footsteps echoing in the alley. As they continued their tour, Jean noticed something peculiar about the city. He asked why all the houses were built pressed right up against each other. He then inquired about the various kinds of taxes the citizens had to pay. Leon listed the citizen tax, traffic tax, and a peculiar glass tax. The glass tax was because windows were a luxury item for the wealthy. He realized he hadn't seen many glass windows in Cassum either. Pointing to a large building, he learned it was a church for the spirits. Inside was a beautiful courtyard fountain, a place where spirits liked to gather. He understood that in this country, spirits were revered much like gods. Leon stopped walking, a thoughtful expression crossing his face for a moment. He apologized, admitting he should have shown Jean the proper tourist sites. Seeing this kinder side, Jean thought that his guide wasn't such a bad person. But the simple compliment seemed to set Leon off into another angry mood. His tone was low and menacing, the title Young Master dripping with sarcasm. Suddenly, a well-dressed older man appeared, addressing Leon with familiarity. Jean stared at the newcomer, wondering who this distinguished-looking man could be. He noted the man's formal attire, questioning why he called Leon Young Master. Leon clarified that Note was the butler for the entire Isekai'd family. He then demanded to know why the butler had suddenly appeared in the plaza. Note's expression was grim as he revealed that an assassin was hunting Leon. A woman in a military uniform arrived, urging them to leave the city immediately. Leon recognized the woman as Lilith, adding another person to the chaotic scene. She pointed to a waiting carriage, insisting they make their escape now. But Leon stood his ground, stubbornly refusing to flee from the danger. The butler calmly tried to reframe the escape as a strategic retreat. Losing patience, Lilith grabbed Leon's arm to force him toward the carriage. She swiftly struck him in the stomach with her sword's pommel, knocking him down. Note caught the winded Leon, lamenting that they were wasting precious time. Lilith showed a brief moment of remorse for her violent but necessary action. She demanded to know why they weren't using a potion to heal him. Jean could see that Leon was still in a great deal of pain. He was completely lost, swept up in a drama he didn't understand. Lilith noticed the growing crowd and urged them to move before they gathered attention. Standing by the carriage, Jean knew he had to offer his assistance. He offered his own self-made potion to the injured Leon and his companions. It was a prototype, but his appraisal skill confirmed it was safe to use. Lilith looked at the strange boy, asking who he was and why he helped. He introduced himself as Jean, explaining he was merely getting a city tour. Note explained to Lilith that they were on their way to a shop. Lilith considered the new information, trying to make sense of the situation. Decisively, she grabbed Jean's wrist and pulled him toward the waiting carriage. Inside the carriage, Note carefully administered Jean's potion to the groaning Leon. Leon tilted the vial back, swallowing the healing liquid in a single gulp. The potion worked quickly, and the pain in his expression began to fade. Jean watched anxiously, his heart pounding as he hoped his potion worked correctly. Leon, now recovered, offered his sincere gratitude for Jean's timely assistance. Jean just wanted to be let go, his shopping trip completely forgotten. Leon looked down, still feeling the lingering effects of the painful blow. Disoriented, he asked where they were, and Note informed him they were inside. He protested that while he was exiled, he had done nothing to warrant running. Lilith explained that his younger brother was the source of the current danger. It seemed his brother had committed another crime, further complicating matters. Jean was completely lost, trying to piece together the family drama. Note urged his master to retreat, questioning his decision to act as a guide. The carriage finally pulled to a stop in front of an elegant building. Note urgently called out to his young master, using a different name. They entered a tailor shop, where Leon quickly requested some new clothes. He apologized to Jean for their tour being so violently interrupted. Jean urged them to hurry, but Leon seemed to be leaving things to the tailor. Lilith formally introduced herself to Jean, revealing her own noble family name. She offered him a ring as a token, advising him to stay away for now. He accepted the ring, unsure of what the future held for his new acquaintances. He finally asked why they kept calling Isekai'd Young Master, a male title. With a dramatic flair, Isekai'd revealed the truth. She was a woman. The revelation left Jean completely speechless, his mind reeling from the shock. Isekai'd explained her boyish demeanor, and flat chest led to the confusion. With a final, knowing wink, Lilith took her leave from the shop. Note apologized for the trouble, assuring him the clothes would be a gift. Alone in the luxurious shop, he wondered what kind of clothes they sold. He was immediately swarmed by maids, ready to take his custom order. He realized this was not a simple clothing store, but a high-end tailor. After the fitting, he was left feeling completely and utterly exhausted. Finding a quiet alley, he decided it was finally time to leave the city. After a long day, Yin uses his storage skill to put away his purchases. He had bought sheets, a bed cover, and books, deciding to eat before sightseeing. He sits down to a simple but satisfying meal of meat and bread. Later, he finds a quiet corner in a library to begin his studies. He announces his return as he arrives back at his grand stone manor. Inside, he finds his spirit wolf, Rish, and gives the sleeping creature a gentle pat. Standing over Rish's basket, he decides it's time to read his new books. He settles by a window, trying to read by the dim flicker of a candle. As darkness falls, he realizes the candlelight is too weak for him to see. He considers building a proper lamp, thinking about fuel and reflective materials. The goddess Mishit suddenly appears, chiding him for forgetting his own abilities. She tells him to simply envision the magic he needs, and he raises his finger. He focuses his mind on the word light, and an orb materializes before him. Delighted, he exclaims how incredibly convenient this magical light is for reading. He reflects on his busy day, feeling a sense of satisfaction with his gains. His thoughts turn to the stern-faced noble he met, Adelheid. He doesn't know what happened to her, but sends a silent prayer for her safety. Several months pass, and his companion Rish sleeps peacefully in its basket. The small spirit wolf suddenly awakens, its eyes snapping open with newfound energy. Rish has fully recovered and now happily accompanies Jean on his forest walks. Jean takes pride in his preserved foods, a sign of his growing self-sufficiency. He has spent months learning local crafts like cheese-making and carpentry. With winter approaching, he plans to build a separate hut for potion making. While working, he spots a small plant that jogs a memory. He remembers the cork tree seedling he bought and decides it's time to plant it. He carefully places the small seedling into a patch of soft earth. He decides to use Mishut's gift, the magical growth-accelerating powder. He sprinkles the sparkling dust over the freshly planted seedling. A loud cracking sound erupts as the plant begins to grow at an impossible rate. Jean watches in utter amazement as the seedling rapidly expands before his eyes. He stands in awe before the massive, fully grown tree that now towers over him. He recalls using the same powerful powder on his grape trellis with great success. He notes the tree will provide excellent material and plans a trip to Cassum. He soon arrives back in the familiar, bustling frontier town of Cassum. Tired of inns, he decides it's finally time to rent a proper house here. As he walks, he notices a handkerchief lying on the cobblestone street. He looks up to see the adventurer Emil, thinking, her again. He recalls that she has been making a name for herself selling potions lately. He decides to completely ignore her, walking past without a word. He realizes buying tools without a local residence would look suspicious. The encounter solidifies his decision. He will definitely rent a house now. A real estate agent shows him a property in a stone-walled alleyway. The agent explains that this newly built house is cheap and in a safe area. Jean observes that in this world, older, well-built houses are often better. He tells the agent he'll take the house, planning to help with renovations. He begins practicing his new skills, starting with the art of cheese making. He then moves on to plastering, carefully applying mortar to a stone wall. He senses he's being watched and spots Emil peeking from around a corner. A view of distant, snow-capped mountains signals the changing of the seasons. John feels the chill in the air as another townsperson complains of the cold. He overhears Emil nearby, lamenting that she's running out of money. He tries to walk past her, hoping to avoid another tiresome interaction. She quickly calls out to him, hurrying to catch up as he walks away. She asks if he's heading to the forest, warning him of the winter dangers. He thanks her for the concern, stating that he is aware of the risks. She grabs his arm, insisting that his life is more important than money. He firmly tells her he isn't being reckless, his stern tone startling her. She stumbles backward with a cry, pretending to have lost her footing. Sitting on the ground, she winks and claims she simply tripped over. With tears welling in her eyes, she tries to sell her clumsy act. Jean walks away, wondering why he's so immune to her blatant attempts at manipulation. As he approaches the city gate, his path is suddenly blocked. He is startled to see Emil's brother, Dean, standing before him. Now the brother, he thinks, bracing himself for another confrontation. Dean recognizes him from their first chaotic meeting at the Adventurers Guild. He apologizes profusely, his hands clasped together in a gesture of remorse. Dean explains that their party member, Kana, gave him a stern lecture. He admits their actions cost the guild a promising adventure. Jean listens silently, acknowledging that Dean at least understands he was wrong. Dean confesses that while Emil was the cause, her intentions weren't malicious. Jean agrees to accept his apology, but says there is one condition. Dean looks confused and asks him what the condition could possibly be. John demands that Dean keep his sister from ever approaching him again. Dean reluctantly agrees, though a hint of hesitation remains in his voice. He then asks if Jean is sure, boasting about how cute his sister is. Jean is completely aghast at the man's powerful sister complex filter. He bluntly tells Dean that Emil's behavior is creepy and not his type. He thinks of his ideal partner, picturing someone reserved like Adelheid. He reconsiders, admitting to himself that a little assertiveness is good. Dean changes the subject, offering to show him where a rare herb grows. Jean's interest is piqued, as he was planning to go herb gathering anyway. Dean gives a cheerful thumbs up, pleased that they've struck a deal. Jean muses that Dean is a normal guy, aside from his sister obsession. The two of them venture out into the lush, sun-dappled forest. Dean points towards a plant with long, blade-like leaves. He identifies it as kinka grass, used by the wealthy to flavor their wine. Jean wonders if it tastes earthy, while Dean finds the thought repulsive. Dean suggests they hunt some rabbits to make for their lunch. Jean realizes he can't use his magical transference or storage with Dean around. They roast skewered rabbit meat over a well-built campfire. As they eat, Jean compliments Dean on his efficient and skillful fighting style. Dean teases him, saying Jean is strong enough to hunt bears for a living. Jean deflects the compliment, claiming he only relies on his arm strength. Dean looks at him skeptically, questioning how he can be so strong. Jean internally vows that he will grow bigger and stronger in the future. Dean's playful expression suddenly sharpens with intent as he watches Jean. In a flash of movement, he lunges forward, pinning Jean to the ground. He points out that Jean's leg strength is just as incredible as his arms. A calm voice interrupts their scuffle as Adelheid emerges from the trees. Both Jean and Dean look up, completely stunned by her sudden appearance. Jean is stunned, recognizing the figure as Leora and questioning her sudden appearance. She calmly states she is hunting a bear, merely stopping for some water. Jean realizes it would be a grave mistake to reveal her name now. Dean asks if they are acquainted, and Jean simply confirms they are. She introduces herself with the alias Ash, a name she asks them to use. Dean gives his name, and Jean is relieved she thought to use an alias. Ash promises to repay him for the potion, but he dismisses her concern. Dean cheerfully shoves a skewer of lumpy, cooked meatballs toward her. With a wide grin, he insists that she should just eat it anyway. The unlikely trio settles around a small campfire by the water's edge. Dean boasts a bear hunt will pay for the potion, then asks about her expensive inn. Jean is shocked, realizing the cost of 1 gold coin a day is immense. They question her lodging, which she reveals is just a room with a bed. She explains a pink-haired guild receptionist recommended the Spartan accommodations. Both Jean and Dean immediately picture the flamboyant and troublesome Emil. Dean passionately defends his sister, blaming the inn for any problems. Jean notes with frustration how Dean's reasoning becomes completely illogical about his sister. He explains his constant worry compels him to help, calling Emil a sweet girl. Adelheid coolly observes the dynamic, deducing Emil as his younger sister. Dean flinches, unnerved by the intensity of her perpetually scowling face. She reveals something unbelievable. There was a spirit hovering near Emil. She explains a mark of the spirit's influence now rests on Dean's forehead. Dean, confused and unable to see it, questions what she is talking about. John believes that if a spirit is truly present, he can easily spot it. A single delicate white flower suddenly sprouts from the top of Dean's head. Jean's cheeks puff out as he desperately tries to suppress a laugh. He tells the clueless Dean to stop looking at him with such a serious face. He observes the blossom closely, thinking it looks more like an artificial flower. Apologizing curtly, Jean reaches out toward the strange flower on Dean's head. With a sharp tug, he plucks the small flower from its unlikely perch. The moment the flower is removed, Dean's eyes roll back into his head. Dean collapses heavily to the ground as Jean offers a quick apology. Adelheid explains the spirit's influence was severed and asks if Jean can see. He confirms he can, his thoughts turning to his own spirit companion, Rish. Rish is shown, a spirit whose influence Jean usually suppresses for normalcy. She is shocked, revealing only her father shared this sight, suspecting a bloodline trait. She clarifies that within her family, only she and her father can see them. She warns him to be careful, as his powerful ability is highly coveted. Jean looks concerned, agreeing that he will heed her important warning. Jean glances at the unconscious Dean, deciding he must be silenced for now. He muses that if they left him, it would be a joke, but he's told no secrets. Ash asks if he was worried about her true identity being discovered. She asks if Dean is his friend. He admits this is only their second meeting. Adelheide's face falls into shadow, completely stunned by his revelation. She is shaken, realizing her own thought process mirrored Jun's exactly. With a weary hand to her head, she accepts it was her own misjudgment. Jean observes her, thinking she seems like a person who attracts bad luck. As they sit by the fire, Jean decides to bring up a new topic. She asks if he can see her spirit, and he wonders which one she means. A tiny bird lands on her head and begins pecking her insistently. Jean is completely taken aback by how attached the little bird seems to be. As the bird continues its work, he asks if it's a dull, constant pain. He asks if it hurts. She stoically replies she's grown used to the ache. He muses that even a sharp pecking could become a familiar, dull pain. Jean leans in, observing the tiny bird perched on her head with curiosity. He notices a strange band of light, like a halo around the bird's neck. Focusing his gaze, he activates his unique appraisal ability on the creature. The result reveals the spirit's purpose, to make her manly, which stuns him. He asks why she has endured this for so long, questioning its purpose. She explains it is to make her a fine heir, prompting his question about a brother. She says her father was drunk when she was born, which Jean misinterprets comically. Her family valued martial skill, so her father gave her a spirit for strength. He finds the story odd, questioning if strength alone makes one manly. She looks confused, admitting she does not know the contract's specific details. He advises releasing the spirit, stating that it appears to be suffering. Adelheid looks down, quietly agreeing with his assessment of the situation. She reveals it should have been released 2 years prior, but the mage got sick. She turns to him, her voice filled with hope, asking if he can free it. He thinks he can handle the collar and suggests they try it back in town. She gratefully agrees, promising a reward regardless of the outcome. He asks about her lack of funds, and her simple solution is to hunt a bear. He suddenly remembers that hunting a bear was her original purpose here. A voice from the clearing cries out with a heartfelt and loud apology. Dean awakens, apologizing profusely, as Adelheid explains he was just charmed. He realizes the spirit's glowing mark affected those close to Amel most strongly. Dean apologizes again, but Jean tells him not to worry about it now. Dean reveals his plan to take a mill to a spirit's branch to contain the chaos. Jean recalls his own search for such a place and asks if one is nearby. Adelheid admits her ignorance and suggests they should just listen for now. Spirit branches are sanctuaries of varying sizes where spirits can find peace. Dean announces he must return to town immediately to make arrangements. Jean suggests a transport service for the bear, a term Dean has never heard. Ash clarifies it is a service for adventurers to carry their heavy prey. He hands her a note with the transport details, which she gratefully accepts. Jean pauses for a moment before adding one final, important condition. Dean winks, giving a thumbs up and promising to keep Jean's secret safe. Jean waves goodbye, realizing Dean knew he had touched the spirit's mark. With incredible speed, Adelheid unsheathes her sword, ready for a fight. Jean matches her speed, his own blade flashing as he prepares for battle. A large wolf slumps to the ground, dispatched by their swift attacks. She praises his efficient fighting style, a compliment he humbly accepts. He explains he is merely copying her expert technique using his own abilities. A transport driver screams in protest, declaring the load is impossible to move. The drivers strain under the weight, telling them to carry the rest themselves. The view from behind shows the cart sagging under the immense weight of their haul. Though they failed to find a bear, Adelheid notes their wolf hunt was profitable. She apologizes for the trouble, but he brushes it off, eager for a challenge. Adelheid expresses concern that Dean might remain unconscious for several days. Jean looks over, asking about the whereabouts of her loyal steward, Note. She explains Note is on a separate task, and Jean sighs about his bossiness. Jean offered his home, asking Adelheid if she would stay with him. The scene shifts to his rustic, timber-frame rental house in Cassum. Inside, he welcomed her, suggesting she take a seat on a nearby chair. Adelheid later commented on his good taste for fixing up the old house. He noticed the faint wild scent of the forest wolves on her clothes. He wondered aloud what to do about a bath, deciding he would ask her. He promised to get things ready for her, telling her to please wait. At the well, he decided against a steam bath, deeming it unsanitary. A hot bath was soon ready, waiting invitingly beside the crackling hearth. From the stairs, he announced the bath was ready, and she thanked him. He decided to use the time to get changed and prepare a guest bed. As he walked upstairs, he thought to himself that he wanted a bathtub. Later, a pot of tea and some snacks were arranged on a small table. A shiny metal teapot sat waiting, ready for their important discussion. Jean asked if they should begin the unsealing. A refreshed Adelheid agreed. She told him she was counting on him as he moved closer to her. His eyes narrowed with focus as he concentrated on the difficult task. The small bird spirit Rue pecked insistently at Adelaide's temple. Adelheid murmured that the bird itself seemed unable to stop pecking her. He saw that he needed to remove the glowing collar of light from its neck. The bird suddenly puffed up its chest, glowing with an agitated energy. It let out a frantic cry, and Adelheid winced from the spiritual backlash. He apologized as she suddenly began to slump forward from the shock. He exclaimed in surprise, catching her just as she fell unconscious. Her hand, which had been clutching her chest, fell away limply. Holding her close, he was surprised to find her chest was completely flat. He gently laid her on the bed, calling out softly to her still form. He wondered if he should stop her from seeking revenge on her father. He gently told the exhausted little bird that it should rest as well. Adelheid and the spirit slept peacefully, side by side on the same pillow. John watched them, thinking the unsealing had gone surprisingly quickly. He decided to stay and furnish the third floor for her while she slept. He busied himself with preparations, gathering books and other supplies. He brought a tray with a drink in case she should wake up thirsty. He continued to work, making the house a more comfortable place to stay. Back at his manor, he called out for his spirit wolf companion, Rish. He apologized to the happy wolf for not paying it much attention lately. He affectionately scratched Rish's fluffy cheeks as it licked his hand. His thoughts returned to Cassum. Adelheid still showed no sign of waking. Suddenly, he sensed a powerful, divine presence manifesting behind him. The goddesses Mishit and Val appeared, along with the god Vafan. Jean was stunned, asking why the deities had suddenly come to his home. Vafan got straight to the point, saying they had a request for him. Val asked if he would be willing to name the spirits who had fled there. Mishit explained his sister was using magic recklessly, unable to see them. Vafan complained her stubbornness had been causing a mess for a year. He added that she was taming spirits but just getting cocky with power. John repeated his sister's name, Namina, the sound unfamiliar to him. He realized they were talking about that orb of light from the summoning. He confirmed his dislike for her, seeing she was still accumulating power. Mishit worried that once Namina could see spirits, she would dominate them. Vafan complained that the constant racket from the spirits was unbearable. Val wept, explaining the hero's actions would have widespread consequences. Jean asked what kind of effect it would have. Mishit told him to see. She gestured toward the window, telling him to look outside. He closed his eyes for a moment, steeling himself for what he might see. His eyes snapped open as he turned his gaze towards the window pane. A terrifying horde of small glowing spirits was pressed against the glass. He gasped in horror, asking if they were all spirits. It was too much. He realized he'd been living among them unseen, and it was better that way. Mishut explained they were drawn to his power. He asked what he should do. Val advised that giving them names would free them from his sister's control. Mishut added that the spirits would choose him first, before being tamed. Overwhelmed, he asked if naming so many was even possible for him. Vafan suggested using numbers, saying he could rename them later if he wished. Val agreed, adding that spirits could receive new names from those they liked. Jean mused on the spirit's pecking order. Someone they like, his sister, then him. Vafan told him the named spirits would lend him power. Jean understood. Mishit said they should begin outside as the spirits could not enter. She told the spirits to form a line to be named for his comfortable life. Seated at a table, Jean began the task calling out their new names. He continued down the list, naming them by color and number. An hour later, he had reached yellow 52, but the line remained. Exhausted, he collapsed onto the table, groaning that he needed a break. A small spirit floated down and poked him insistently on the cheek. He jolted upright, suddenly declaring that he had to go check on Ash. He activated his transference skill, making a quick escape from his duties. He reappeared in Cassum, letting out a quiet sigh of relief. He thought he had escaped, only to find the goddess Mishut waiting. He asked in surprise if she had followed him, but she only giggled. The small bird spirit flew over to him as he approached the bed. Mishut confirmed that the little bird was indeed a spirit, as he knew. Jean explained that the person in the bed was Adelheid, known as Ash. He told Mishut that she had collapsed when he tried to release the spirit. The goddess looked at him with sudden and intense concern. She dramatically declared that this was a maiden in a terrible pinch. Floating over the bed, she repeated her dramatic declaration with a flourish. John was shocked, realizing Mishut could clearly see Adelheid as a woman. Mishut accused him of being a bad human, about to take advantage of her. She playfully wagged her finger, telling him that he was wrong. She placed her hands over Adelheid's forehead, casting a gentle blessing. She declared that with her intervention, Adelheid should now be fine. She reassured John that Adelheid would be all right. He was very relieved. She said not to worry, guessing Adelheid would awaken the following night. Mishut then asked him what the name of the small bird spirit was. He recalled that his appraisal skill had identified its name as Rue. He explained that its old contract was broken and a new one could be made. Mishut told him that the little spirit wanted him to give it a name. He considered Fluffy Chan for its soft feathers, but dismissed the idea. He looked closer, noticing its beautiful blue plumage, and began to think. Searching for the perfect name, Jean asked the small spirit, "How about Az?" The bird nuzzles his cheek affectionately, showing its immediate approval of the new name. He smiles, explaining he took the name from the Italian word for the color blue. The newly christened Az lets out a happy chirp, as if asking to stay. Jean looks over at the sleeping Adelheid, knowing she will miss her longtime companion. He decides to resume his duties, asking Mishut if they should return to the manor. Using his transference skill, he arrives back at his estate under a starry sky. He is surprised to find the gods Gakle and Rordale waiting for him as well. Seated at his desk, he begins the long and arduous task of naming the spirits. At last he finishes, only to be told the gods will return if more appear. Feeling a surge of power, he tries to cast a light spell, but Adelheid warns him to wait. It's too late. A blinding, explosive flash of white light erupts from his hand. He cries out in pain, shielding his eyes from the overwhelming brightness of his own magic. Adelheid looks on, exasperated, reminding him that she had explicitly told him to wait. Having tempered the spell with darkness, she tells him it is now safe to look. Mishut explains the incredible power was the collective gratitude of all the light spirits he named. The goddess Val warns him to learn control, as such power is dangerous without proper visualization. He sheepishly recalls Mishut's earlier advice about imagining the magic, realizing his mistake. Suddenly, a loud growl from his stomach breaks the divine tension. He mutters to himself that it must be about time for dinner. He turns to see the entire pantheon of deities staring at him expectantly. Playing the gracious host, he asks with a weary smile if they will be staying to eat. The gods immediately shout their surprisingly picky food requests, from honey to plain salt. He prepares a simple but delicious meal of grilled fish and hearty pork soup. Taking a sip of the warm soup, he quietly remarks on how delicious it is. He glances up from his bowl, taking in the surreal sight of his divine dinner guests. The goddesses Mishut and Haralfa enjoy their honey and wine with quiet elegance. The elder gods, Gekkel and Val, seem content with their simple bread and tea. Joan can't help but think what a strange and surreal scene this is. The young god Rordale happily spoons salt into his mouth, commenting on its special quality. Jean asks if he's really okay just eating salt, concerned for the boy's well-being. The strange meal makes him wonder if spirits can even eat food at all. Mishut explains that humanoid spirits can eat, though they cannot actually taste it. She elaborates that they prefer to savor sensations like morning dew or the scent of flowers. As Jean processes this, his spirit wolf Rish pops up, clearly begging for a bite. He gently scolds the fluffy creature, telling it to wait until he's finished his meal. Vafan looks at Rish, revealing that the small spirit was once his powerful master. Jean looks down at Rish with wide eyes, confused by the unexpected revelation. Mishut giggles, saying the old Rish was unapproachable, but this version is undeniably cute. She then apologizes, admitting she is still a little suspicious of the spirit's true nature. Her sudden change in tone leaves Jean utterly baffled. Gal explains Rish's tragic past as a destructive god who shook the very earth. Before its fall, the spirit was arrogant, crushing all who opposed its selfish desires. Jean stares at the fluffy creature in shock, exclaiming that it was an alpha dog. The goddess Mishut looks on, completely bewildered by the unfamiliar term alpha. He explains an alpha is a pack's leader and how such dynamics can be unhealthy. He adds that, to live by human rules, one must respect the proper order of things. Gali reminds him that Rish is a spirit, not a common wolf. Jean asks Vafan if wolves and spirits are truly that different, but receives only silence. Gal issues a stern warning. Rish is highly intelligent, stubborn, and should not be underestimated. Jean simply looks at Rish, musing that whatever its past, it is very cute now. Mishut tells him to be careful, and he thanks her for the continued warnings and concern. She takes his hands, calling him her precious person, and noting his roguish charm. As the gods begin to fade, Mishut offers a final, heartfelt word of thanks. She asks him to continue looking after the spirits, and he agrees before they vanish. For a brief moment, only he and the god Vafan remain in the quiet night. Vafan gives Rish a final pat, calling it the proud wolf before he too departs. Vafan disappears in a column of divine light, leaving Jean alone in his manor. Jean contemplates the god's words, thoughtfully repeating proud wolf to himself. Rish immediately rolls onto its back, playfully exposing its belly in a comical display. Deciding he's had enough excitement for one night, Jean resolves to take a bath and sleep. The next day, he finds himself walking through the bustling streets of the Pottery town. He enters a shop, his purpose to order a set of custom pasta bowls. While waiting, he admires a fine tea set and decides to buy some new dishes. He arrives at the workshop of the potter, Malcolm, with its massive outdoor kilns. He greets the craftsman and presents his own design idea for a new bathtub. Malcolm replies that he, too, has been thinking about a new product design. Jean listens intently, holding the scroll containing his own detailed plans. Malcolm mentions a timely inquiry from a noble in the next country, startling Jean. The noble wants a tub with cat's feet, and Jean instantly knows it's his sister's party. Malcolm eagerly asks for his help, and Jean agrees, figuring he might as well cooperate. Leaving the workshop, he finds it strange how his past keeps finding ways to connect to him. He returns to the rented house in Cassum to check on his recovering guest. Inside, Adelheid begins to stir, her brow furrowed as she slowly returns to consciousness. Jean enters the room with Az on his finger and quietly asks if she is all right. Adelheid's eyes fly open in surprise, letting out a small gasp as she sees him. She thanks him for his help and asks if she has any painful injuries. She remarks that her back is a bit sore, likely from being in bed for so long. She wonders aloud if she's been asleep since the morning or just the evening before. Jean calmly informs her that it has been 3 full days, leaving her utterly shocked. She feels bad for the trouble, but he dismisses it, saying he simply let her rest. He then admits that he took the liberty of renaming her bird while she was asleep. Gently stroking the small creature, she asks him what name he chose for it. He looks at her and simply says the new name he has chosen, Az. A rare, beautiful smile spreads across Adelheid's face as she calls it a good name. She notes the spirit's acceptance means it likes him, which makes Jean blush in surprise. He is stunned by her transformation, thinking how beautiful she is without her constant scowl. She observes how comfortable Az seems with him and asks if this is the case. Holding Az, she muses that she is not just a beautiful woman, but a handsome youth. Jean grows flustered, suspecting this newfound charm is a trick to lure him into bed. Adelheid looks at him confused and asks if she was the one being tricked by him. Jean panics slightly, realizing she is sitting up in the very bed he placed her in. He waves his hands dismissively, insisting he didn't trick her at all. He offers her soup and rest, and she asks if she can stay the night. She says she wouldn't be so cruel as to throw her out, and she apologizes. Jean smiles, telling her to get well soon so she can repay him for the inn. Her thoughts turn to the inn fees, and she calls him a diligent person. Later that day, they find themselves in a lively tavern in the city. Jean spots Note and Dean chatting together at the bar. Note turns, his face etched with pure relief, and addresses Adelheid as Ash Sama, glad she is safe. Jean watches from a distance as Adelheid and her butler, Note, stand together. Adelheid observes that while some people have spirits, none have flowers. Jean agrees. A cheerful voice announces their arrival. The adventurer Dean has found them. Dean suggests a drink as an apology for the earlier trouble, asking Adelheid's opinion. Adelheid introduces herself as Ash and her companion as Note, a former adventurer. Jean watches them, thinking that a group of 2 or 3 is all the same. 2 large wooden mugs filled with frothy ale sit on the tavern table. Dean asks Jean if he has a type, bringing up his own sister, Emile. Dean explains Emile's spirit affinity attracted many adventurers, asking Jean to keep it quiet. He sighs, admitting his sister's spoiled nature needs to be corrected. A spirit's mischief, it is explained, can happen to anyone unintentionally. Adelheid warns that a spirit's prank can become a grave matter, like Dean's possession. Dean acknowledges her point, and Jean realizes she is trying to warn him. Adelheid muses that their unusual circumstances must seem strange to outsiders. Taking a deep drink, Dean says he'll handle the payment for Adelheid later. He offers to find John an inn, since he's now living with his sister. Note politely informs Dean that they require 2 rooms for a short-term stay. Jean sips his ale, noting that at 15, he can drink without guilt, though the taste is unimpressive. Dean calls out to him, getting his attention. He asks why John acts like a mid-level adventurer when he's clearly different. Dean offers to introduce him to a reliable adventurer who handles requests diligently. John accepts the offer, saying that would be a great help. Dean suggests they meet at the same time tomorrow, and Jean agrees. Hesitating, Dean says there is one more thing he needs to tell them. He warns both Jean and Adelheid to be careful of their strange mutual attraction. He points at Adelheid, telling her to stop scowling when things get weird. Jean pipes up that he agrees about her scowl, much to Dean's surprise. Dean fumes that they're the strange ones as Emil peeks around a corner, annoyed. A new chapter begins as Joan wakes in a soft bed, Rish sleeping nearby. Sitting up, Jean cheerfully wishes his spirit wolf, Rish, a good morning. He lifts the fluffy Rish into his arms, and the creature responds happily. Looking out his window, he sees a snow-capped mountain peak and realizes winter has arrived. In a hot pan, bacon and a sunny-side-up egg sizzle enticingly. He pours water into a pot, getting ready to cook. He spreads a thick layer of plum jam across a piece of toast. He takes a large, satisfying bite of his breakfast. The combination of sweet jam and savory cheese is, he decides, an excellent one. Sipping his morning drink, he quietly contemplates the arrival of the cold season. A painful memory flashes by of his first miserable winter surviving on the island. His plate's now empty, he gives thanks for the wonderful meal. He rises from the table, ready to prepare for his meeting in town. He arrives in the familiar, rustic streets of the frontier town, Cassum. Dressed in his dark hooded cloak, he introduces himself as Joan. Adelheid and Note arrive, and she introduces them as Ash and Note. Adelheid states that she wants to properly settle the payment for the potion. Jean tries to wave it off, but she insists on repaying him. Her expression grows intensely serious, thinking he is being too reserved. Jean suggests they handle it once her living situation is more stable. Adelheid agrees to his terms, and Note gives a respectful bow of understanding. As someone calls his name, Jane raises his hand in greeting. Dean waves from a nearby doorway, beckoning him to come over. Dean introduces the rugged man beside him as Retzi, and Jean greets him politely. Retz returns the greeting, but admits he's not very good with formalities. Jean shakes his hand, wondering if this is the reliable adventurer Dean mentioned. Retzi turns to Dean, his expression stern as he calls his name. He suddenly pinches Jane's cheeks, complaining that his pretty face will attract women. Dean winks, saying he's not as prudent as Jean appears to be. Joan's face sparkles as he blames his handsome features on those people, the gods. Jean calls out to the startled Retzi to get his attention. Retzi, his expression shifting to serious, agrees it's time for them to leave. Dean asks if Retzi is content just completing quests normally, and he confirms. Joan playfully asks if Retzi has a complex about his own face, which he denies. With his first official request finally settled, he ventures into the snowy forest. Their feet crunch through the snow as Retzi speaks of their main objective. Retzi explains that in winter, he hunts rabbits for their excellent meat and fur. He adds that while bear pelts sell, their meat is tough, unlike a good rabbit. Jean mentions that the reward for bears seems to have recently gone down. Retz suggests Jean take a look, saying he and Ash are the reason. He points to the ground, showing how to read a monster's trail in the grass. Jean is impressed, thinking that Retzi seems cool and professional. Retz explains that a rabbit's hind legs are larger than its front paws. Jean correctly identifies a set of linear tracks as belonging to a fox. Retz confirms a nearby trail is a horned rabbit's. Jean asks how he can tell. He points to a faint but distinct claw mark left in the snow. Retz deduces a monster fox is hunting it. Jean is amazed by his skill. Jean reflects that he's only relied on his skills, not thoughtful observation. Retz explains his short bow works on normal animals, but not on monsters. He calmly draws back his bow, his aim steady and focused. He spots his target and lets the arrow fly toward a monster rabbit. The arrow hits its mark, and the rabbit stands stunned, its eyes swirling. Retz notes that monster rabbits are easy prey because they approach out of curiosity. Jean agrees, asking if he can also see him hunt a fox. At a local shop, a woman praises Retzi's clean butchering skills. Jean is impressed by Retzi's high-level social and professional skills. A round of celebratory drinks is brought to their table at the tavern. Jean thanks Retzi for the day's lesson, saying he learned a great deal. Retzi calls Jean a strange man for enjoying his simple, practical hunting style. Jean, flustered, says Retzi's methods are better suited for his slender arms. Retzi laughs, urging him to drink more. Jean thanks him sheepishly. That night, Jean's manor stands peacefully under a starry sky in a snow-capped peak. The next morning, Jean rolls up his sleeve, preparing to start a new routine. He collapses while doing push-ups, vowing to start muscle training. Rish looks on, confused. He travels to a town street lined with neat, well-built houses. He greets the potter, Malcolm, who welcomes him to his workshop. Malcolm proudly unveils the gleaming finished cat's foot bathtub. Jean is amazed. Jean thanks him, and Malcolm asks how he plans to carry it home. He smiles awkwardly, realizing he had completely forgotten about that logistical problem. He panics, unable to use his storage skill. Malcolm suggests arranging a cart. Jean quickly says he has it handled, asking the potter to just wrap it up. Malcolm and his assistant carry the wrap tub outside, asking if this is far enough. Jean watches as the potter, Malcolm, discusses the custom bathtub project. He listens to the conversation, a slightly bemused look on his face. He considers the trouble of using his storage magic on such a large item. Snow begins to fall on the timber-framed house he has rented in Cassum. Jean gets to work, diligently prying up the old broken floor tiles. He digs a trench outside in the cold, preparing for the new plumbing. He carefully lays a new wall, focusing on each individual brick. With the main construction done, he smiles, proud of his handiwork. He stands triumphantly in the new bathroom, admiring the finished clawfoot tub. A sudden knock at the door interrupts his moment of satisfaction. Adelheid is there, offering a gift and apologizing for the interruption. She explains that she's come to give him her moving-in greetings. Jean is happily surprised, asking where she found a house. She points to the building right next door, stunning him with the news. He laughs, realizing they are now extremely close neighbors. Adelheid says Note found the house, though she never told him Jean's address. Jean suspects this was no coincidence, but likely his own fault. She then confesses to feeling a strange, floating sensation around him. He is flustered by her intense blush as she asks if he felt her floating. He quickly changes the subject, inviting her in from the cold. He gestures, offering her a warm cup of tea. At the table, he thanks her for the gift and says he'll enjoy it. The gift is revealed to be a beautiful and delicious-looking fig tart. He takes a bite, the sound of his fork clinking against the plate. He declares it the best dessert he has eaten in the entire town. Adelheid credits her butler, Note, for his excellent taste. Her expression turns curious as she changes the subject. She asks what he was making when she arrived at his door. He tells her it was a bath, a concept she finds confusing. She puzzles over the strange idea of having a bath inside a house. Deciding it's easier to show her, he leads her to the room. Adelheid gasps in awe at the sight of the elegant modern bathroom. She asks if this is truly a bath, and he confirms what it is. She murmurs that she has never seen anything so beautiful. He invites her to be the first to try it once the walls dry. Adelheid asks if she can bring Note to see this incredible creation. A brief transition passes as they wait for the butler to arrive. Note appears at the door, politely announcing his presence. Adelheid proudly shows off the new bathtub to her impressed butler. She happily reminds him of her promise to be the first to use it. Jean breaks into a sweat, suddenly remembering Adelheid is a noble lady. Note, amused, says that while a servant should refuse, he is quite interested. He then asks if Jean has also shown them the kitchen. Adelheid remarks on the surprising lack of unpleasant smells in the house. Note inspects the partitioned toilet, asking which workshop built it. Jean hesitates for a moment before admitting he built it himself. The butler is completely stunned by this unexpected revelation. Adelheid proudly confirms that Jean renovated the house himself. Note urgently asks if he has registered these techniques with the guild. He insists Jean do so immediately, predicting he'll make a fortune. The scene shifts to Jean in a snowy forest, feeling he's in trouble. He shivers violently by a frozen lake, declaring it's far too cold. He thinks of making a futon for Adelheid, but needs a downcoat first. He spots horned geese, deciding to hunt them quickly and go home. His hand glows with power as he prepares to cast a spell. He draws his bow, casting a silence spell to conceal his attack. The arrow soars silently through the cold air towards the geese. It strikes one of the birds, which cries out as it's hit. He smiles brightly, happy with his successful shot. He begins to reel in his catch, but something feels off. Suddenly, other birds swarm, drawn by the scent of blood. He makes a hasty escape, using his transference skill to teleport away. He lands safely back at his manor, shaken by the sudden attack. A fire crackles warmly inside his home, a welcome comfort. He sits by the hearth with Rish, resolving to hunt more later. A firm knock sounds on the door of his stone manor. He opens it to find Note, who asks how his move is going. Adelheid is there too, thanking Jean for his help with her renovations. She mentions members of the commercial guild came to see his work. Note presents him with a moving-in gift, a surprisingly light futon. Note reveals it is made from the feathers of a horned white goose. Jean is shocked, recognizing it as a priceless, top-quality item. Adelheid admits it's perhaps too luxurious for a housewarming gift. Jean smiles sheepishly, confessing he didn't know the geese were so valuable. Adelheid invites him to her house for dinner, as her kitchen is still unusable. She tells Jean that he should come along as well. Note politely refuses, stating that a butler does not dine with his master. Adelheid insists, saying she invited him, and Jean agrees. The scene shifts back to the timber frame houses in Cassum. A lavish dinner is served, featuring a whole roasted goose. Jean explains he tried his best to recreate the fig tart she brought him. Note inspects the roasted goose, remarking on its high quality. The three of them offer a quiet prayer of thanks before their meal. Isekai'd takes a large, satisfying bite of the tart. Her eyes widen in surprise as she declares that it is delicious. Note savors the soup, finding the combination of flavors exquisite. Jean observes Isekai'd's stern face, but knows she is enjoying the meal. He feels that he is slowly beginning to understand her better. He tells her she looks happy, and she agrees that good food makes her so. Note stands to serve the tart, but stops abruptly, sensing danger. A small, dark, fuzzy spirit shoots out from the dessert. It zips past Jean, leaving the tart smoking on the plate. Isekai'd's expression instantly hardens as she senses the magic. Note's face becomes grim, his eyes fixed on the disturbance. Jean is startled, wondering what just happened so suddenly. A memory surfaces of Chris's spirits, one of which was an unknown dark entity. Isekai'd thinks Jean is feigning ignorance to test her own spirit abilities. Realizing he's under suspicion, Jean knows he must bluff his way out. He smiles, blaming a temperature difference and offering to get a towel. He walks away, leaving a pensive Isekai'd to watch him go. The elderly butler, Note, watches with a grave and silent concern. Jean wonders how to handle the fiery spirit, recalling their weakness to metal. He declares this its punishment, plunging the box into a pickling jar. Relieved, he sets down a special enamelware container he brought from Cassum. His spirits celebrate, promising to prepare his favorite things for him later. Suddenly, Note appears behind him, startling him by calling his name. Jean turns with a friendly smile, asking the butler what he needs. Note bows deeply, apologizing for his spirit having ruined the tart. Flustered, Jean asks if Isekai'd is aware of the existence of spirits. Looking at the contained spirit, Jean feigns ignorance about the matter. Note explains the rigid hierarchy between the main and branch noble families. He observes that Jean's gray hair and amber eyes resemble Isekai'd's. Jean is surprised, wondering if commanding spirits is a known ability. He wants no part of this family drama and resolves to stay out. He seals the spirit, telling Note to use the entrance next time. A mushroom spirit appears on Note's head, which he mistakes for a pickle. Jean sighs, realizing he and the butler now share the same secret. The deep night sky is filled with a sea of brilliant stars. A large ship is docked at the pier of a bustling port town. Jean arrives at the port town's lively fish market to investigate. A small white cat tries to snatch a fish from a vendor's basket. He smiles, taking in the lively and chaotic atmosphere of the market. He spots his sister and her friends, recalling they misuse their magic. A diagram shows how magic corrupts spirits, turning animals into monsters. He wonders if the hero is carelessly using magic without understanding the consequences. He overhears local fishermen complaining about rivals encroaching on their territory. One fisherman mentions that their own recent skirmishes have led to injuries. Another fisherman scoffs, saying the hero and saint are the real problem. He muses that if a demon lord appears, they might need their help. A pickpocket tries to steal a purse, but is caught mid-theft. The small money pouch drops from the thief's hand as he's caught. John catches the purse, identifying the fleeing man as a pickpocket. It seems his sister's fundamental situation has not changed at all. Having seen enough, he decides to buy some seafood and head home. Snow blankets the roof of his large, quiet manor house. He prepares a beautiful feast of raw and grilled oysters for dinner. He brings a fresh oyster to his lips, ready to enjoy it. The fresh oysters are plump and delicious, safe to eat thanks to appraisal. The grilled oysters are also excellent, with a fragrant aroma of miso. He decides to preserve the leftover oysters by pickling them in oil. Noticing Rish watching him, he kindly asks the spirit if it wants to play. Rish cautiously approaches his outstretched hand and gives it a sniff. The spirit wolf turns its head away with a disdainful puff of air. He asks if Rish dislikes the smell of seafood as it backs away. As darkness falls, he realizes he needs to create some light. He unleashes his magic and the window erupts in blinding light. Overwhelmed by the brightness, he cries out and covers his eyes. He resolves to control his magic, planning special training for tomorrow. In the deep, snowy forest of monsters, his special training begins. A low growl alerts him to a horned rabbit nearby. He unleashes his power, casting a swirling and powerful fireball spell. The fireball engulfs the horned rabbit, sending it flying through the air. The defeated monster lies dazed on the ground, its eyes swirling. Realizing his power is immense, he knows he must learn to control it. He practices his control, engulfing a large wolf in another fireball. He casts a wind slash, slicing clean through another monster rabbit. He summons water bullets, dousing a horned fox with magical projectiles. After a long night of practice, he feels he has improved greatly. He looks over the pile of defeated monsters, wondering if he overdid it. He decides to use his storage skill and create a light source. The large timber frame building of the Adventurers Guild stands tall. He enters the guild intending to check the seasonal quest requests. He decides he must investigate the deepest part of the forest again. An adventurer reports that the deep forest felt unusually stirred up. Dean worries about hunting a three-horn without an official, high-paying quest. He clenches his fist, emphasizing the three-horn's immense strength and danger. Chris appears, declaring they cannot wait for the creature to grow stronger. Jean stares blankly, completely bewildered by the flamboyant stranger's appearance. Jean tries to recall the name Chris, feeling it sounds familiar. Adelheid and Note arrive, carrying a large bear pelt from their hunt. Chris greets Adelheid with a flourish, calling her the bear hunter. Chris acknowledges Adelheid's foul mood but insists on the mission's importance. John recalls Dean suggesting Chris would be a good partner for him. Chris leans in close to Jean, calling him a troublesome but interesting man. He smiles warmly, asking who this beautiful person is, likening him to a Dark Lord. Adelheid dryly agrees that Jean is indeed like the Dark Lord. Chris introduces himself as Chris Lease, a 3-star silver rank adventurer. As they shake hands, Jean notices Chris's hair and eyes change color. Chris gives a knowing, confident smile, assessing the young man before him. He formally invites Jean to join him on the three-horn hunt. Jean is shocked, realizing he has been roped into this dangerous quest. Chris formally invites the Dark Lord to join him on the hunt. Jean remains stunned, realizing he has been drawn into the situation. Dean struggles to hold back laughter, but Chris tells him he'll remember it. Chris admits he didn't see the beast but is still worried. He puffs out his chest, declaring that his powerful intuition is at work. Dean is completely dumbfounded that Chris is basing this on intuition alone. Chris insists it's more than intuition, much to Dean's growing frustration. Chris asks if they should hurry or wait until spring for the hunt. Note whispers to Jean, wondering why this flamboyant man holds such sway. Note explains that Master Chris is followed and aided by a spirit. The spirit is a revelation type, granting him premonitions and a good reputation. John understands that those who can see spirits are considered divinely protected. This blessing grants boons like enhanced physical abilities and resistance to sunburn. Dean realizes a subjugation will require 2 silver rank adventurers, including himself. Chris slyly reminds Dean that he owes the guild a debt. The guild plans to recruit 2 iron rank adventurers for the three-horn hunt. Dean realizes they will need to mobilize gold rank adventurers from other cities. Chris's demeanor becomes serious, noting the forest's atmosphere is not normal. Adelheid's face is grim as she identifies the foul presence as miasma. A tense silence falls between Adelheid, John, and Dean, the air thick with unspoken questions. Dean earnestly asks John to join their quest into the forest come springtime. John immediately shuts him down with a swift pass, holding up a hand. Dean quickly suggests Jean can just be the baggage handler and run from danger. Jean admits he is personally curious about the state of the spirits in the forest. He agrees to the quest, much to Dean's surprised delight. Jean insists Adelheid should come too, as having 2 spirit seers is better. Dean agrees, saying they will make the request through the guild and wait for spring. Winter settles over Jean's manor, the roof and grounds blanketed in thick snow. By the fire, Jean suspects his sister's magic is causing the forest's strange occurrences. He resolves to investigate the forest again tomorrow, hating that he must clean up her mess. A caption announces his destination, the deepest part of the demon forest. He enters the snowy woods, deciding to check on the state of the spirits. Activating his ability, he sees the air filled with countless faint, ethereal beings. A tiny winged fairy flutters weakly through the shimmering air, its form unstable. A ghostly fox spirit floats unsteadily, its essence looking frayed and worn. A small, dark, blob-like spirit quivers, its form threatening to dissipate completely. He notes that most spirits that come to his home are in this tattered state. Suddenly, a larger, bat-winged spirit attacks a smaller, weaker one with a desperate cry. The dark spirit bites down and absorbs the other, which vanishes in a puff. The dark spirit's own shadowy form seems to coalesce and become more solid. He realizes they consume each other to replace lost essence, a sight he cannot bear. His healing won't work. He must form contracts and name them, just like with Rish. He reaches out with sudden resolve, firmly grasping one of the dark, blob-like spirits. He looks at the small creature and bestows its new identity. You are Black One. He holds another small spirit to his chest, naming it Black 2. Cradling a dark spectral rabbit in his arms, he calls it Black 3. He holds a shadowy squirrel in his hands, declaring it to be Black 4. Letting out a weary sigh, he decides that's enough work for one day. He thinks that naming the spirits who resist his control is especially tiring. The bright afternoon sun shines through the trees as he leaves the deep forest. He walks through the snow, approaching the familiar stone farmhouse of his friends. A voice from the doorway asks if he has a moment to spare. The Dionisio family greets him warmly, the children joyfully shouting his name. The father pulls him into a tight hug, a gesture John is still unused to. He presents his gifts of various souvenirs and say, mentioning he also brought cake. The two young boys look up at him with sparkling eyes and grateful smiles. The children swarm him in a group hug, thanking him for the presents. The father smiles, saying Gina is always so thoughtful as he accepts the gifts. The mother, Shivas, thanks him and says she will cut the cake for everyone. The father, already teary-eyed over the sake, wonders what Jean has been up to. Shivas explains they spend winter by the fire, shelling beans and repairing farm tools. Jean offers to help, and the father gratefully accepts his assistance. Shivas returns with a smile, announcing that the cake is now sliced. The boys happily munch on the cake, declaring how delicious it is. The daughter, Tina, blushes and boldly announces she will be Jean's bride. Her mother is amused, while her father vehemently declares he will not allow it. The father protests that Tina promised to be his bride when she grew up. He demands to know what Jean dislikes about his daughter, much to Jean's confusion. The two boys cheerfully announce that they will go be Jean's brides instead. They launch themselves at a bewildered Jean, trapping him in another tight hug. The father looks on, a dark and determined expression crossing his face. He lunges forward to join the hug, shouting that he's coming too. Tina and her mother watch the chaotic scene, laughing happily together. Jean reflects on the warmth of a normal family, so different from his own. The winter passes quickly, and with the arrival of spring, it is time to depart. A flamboyant voice announces the arrival of the wise man, Chris. Chris greets Adelheid, who seems less than thrilled by his new nickname for her. The grizzled adventurer, Retzi, formally introduces himself to the party. Retz tells Jean to be careful, as Chris is in charge of their battle plans. Dean admits he is worried about bringing the inexperienced Jean along on the hunt. Adelheid and Chris both seem to agree with this sentiment. Dean asks if the famous new bear hunter is perhaps Adelheid. Jean realizes he hasn't been to the guild recently to register his accomplishments. Chris laughs, understanding the situation now that the pieces have clicked into place. Jean wonders if the spirit's favor is the reason Chris insisted he should come. Chris confirms that his own spirit has been telling him about Jean for a while. A tiny winged fairy sits on Chris's shoulder, admiring his handsome face. A young woman named Kana formally introduces herself to the group. Kana bows, thanking Jean for his past assistance and telling him not to worry. She shyly asks if he could provide the specifications for his pack when they return. She presents him with an ornate bottle, a gift from the guild for his safety. The party departs from the town, heading towards the deep forest. Dean comments on Jean's impressive leather pack, asking about the roll on top. Jean explains that it's a futon he made himself, much to his companion's surprise. Adelheid and Dean question its practicality, worrying it will be heavy and cumbersome. Jean demonstrates the quick-release buckle on his chest strap for easy removal. Chris muses that his own party's luggage is probably more of a nuisance. His fairy companion swoons over his serious expression, which Jean finds ridiculous. The party walks in a tight formation as they venture deeper into the woods. Chris moves with an athletic grace, his senses on high alert. Retzi scouts ahead, a small fox keeping pace with him on a tree branch. Retzi signals that it's time to make camp for the day. They've made good time thanks to the clear weather and set up by a stream. Jean pulls a heavy cast-iron Dutch oven from his seemingly bottomless pack. He starts a fire and begins making a stew with dried chicken and vegetables. The stew comes to a rolling boil, signaling that the meal is ready. He then pulls out a cloth-wrapped bundle from his bag, preparing another surprise. He reveals a box packed with perfectly made pork cutlet sandwiches and fried chicken. Dean, chewing thoughtfully, remarks on how delicious Jean's lunch looks. In an instant, the entire party's hands descend upon the box of sandwiches. Chris takes a bite, marveling at the incredible softness of the bread. Retzi and Dean agree the meat is delicious, though they prefer harder bread. Note, examining the cutlet, asks if the coating is what is known as breadcrumbs. Jean explains the process, noting that making the oyster sauce is the hardest part. Adelheid tries a piece of the fried chicken, recognizing it as chicken. Jean details the marinade: salt, pepper, garlic, ginger, fish sauce, and brandy. With their satisfying meal finished, the party prepares to march on. The adventurer's boots tread steadily along the grassy forest path. Jean notices his own boots are caked in mud, far dirtier than the others. Jean admires the butler note's perfectly polished shoes, which remain spotless even on the trail. Chris warns that wolves are numerous ahead, as Jean resolves to imitate his graceful movements. With a smile, Chris explains that while weaker than bears, wolves hunt in dangerous packs. Jean and Adelheid acknowledge the warning, preparing themselves for the coming threat. Jean reflects that Chris, though sometimes irritating, is also a very attentive and caring person. Suddenly, a pack of snarling wolves emerges from the trees, their arrival announced by low growls. Retz and Chris immediately turn, drawing their weapons to confront the approaching wolf pack. To Jean's surprise, the wolves completely ignore the others and leap directly towards him. Retz shouts his name in alarm, but Jean winks, saying they must think he's the weakest. Jean plants his foot firmly on the grassy ground, bracing himself for the attack. He springs forward, his massive decapitation sword held high for a devastating downward swing. With a look of intense concentration, Jean prepares to unleash the full power of his blade. In a single fluid motion, Jean's sword sweeps across, felling the entire wolf pack instantly. Retzi stares, his mouth agape, completely stunned by Jean's incredible display of strength. Chris's eyes sparkle with delight as he dramatically dubs Jean, "You of the dark arts." Gushing, Chris finds it wonderful that June seems vulnerable but isn't. John internally disagrees. Dean admits his first impression was wrong, while Retzi's confidence is shaken by the newcomer's power. Note wisely advises them to move on before the scent of blood attracts more dangerous creatures. Dean quickly agrees, urging the party to leave the area immediately. The group walks away from the scene of the swift battle, heading deeper into the forest. A title page for Chapter 12 appears, noting the choice of comfort over rebellion. At their new campsite, Jean begins setting up a simple, practical A-frame tent. He kneels before his handiwork, deciding that this simple shelter will be good enough. Retzi watches with a skeptical expression, asking if Jean is being careless with his setup. Chris thoughtfully deduces that a waterproof sheet allows for a simple roof and walls. He throws his arms open wide, praising Jean's wonderful creation and moving in for a hug. Jean flashes back to the 2 months he spent surviving alone on a deserted island. Adelheid pitches in, arranging a bed of soft moss to use as a cushion. Chris notes that with everyone preparing their bedding, it almost feels like a Japanese mountain camp. Jean announces that he and the others will go catch some fish for their dinner. He decides to prepare soup for everyone, an idea Retzi gratefully welcomes on the cold night. A large pot of stew, filled with meat and vegetables, bubbles heartily over the campfire. Jean stirs the pot, announcing a tomato soup with dried meat and plenty of vegetables. Dean scratches his head, looking puzzled as if he has forgotten something important. He recalls seeing Jean slapping dough earlier, wondering if it was some kind of strange ritual. Dean remains perplexed by the memory of June's odd, ceremonial-looking actions. The finished ball of dough sits on a rock, perfectly smooth and ready to be used. Jean puts the dough aside to rest, planning to use it for tomorrow's breakfast as well. The vast, starry night sky is visible through a break in the dark forest canopy. The campfire meal is ready, a large pot of soup, grilled fish, and a mysterious pizza. Chris asks about the unfamiliar dish, and Jean explains it's a pizza with bacon and asparagus. Chris looks confused, admitting he has never heard of a food called pizza before. Dean, still bewildered, asks Jean to explain the strange dough-slapping ritual from earlier. A hand lifts a slice of the pizza, and the melted cheese stretches in a long, gooey string. Dean takes a large bite, his eyes widening as he exclaims how incredibly delicious it is. Note praises the seasoning, and Jean suggests it would also be good with tomato sauce. The butler looks up in surprise, asking if Jean happens to have any tomato sauce. Jean has a sudden realization. He hasn't seen a single fresh tomato in this world. Adelheid compliments the tasty soup, as Jean explains he just used some dried tomatoes. Chris's hand moves with delicate grace, plucking a stray leaf from Jean's collar. He laments that Jean would have made a fine bride, much to Jean's vocal annoyance. Dean then asks Jean what his type is, playfully puffing out his own chest as an example. Jean thinks that Adelheid is rather flat-chested, causing her to blush with embarrassment. The butler note looks completely exhausted and distressed by the chaotic dinner conversation. Retza asks if Jean distrusts people, and Jean admits he's still learning how to interact. He recalls how he was once surrounded by untrustworthy people and became the target of pranks. In thought bubbles, Retzi and Chris wonder about the nature of these pranks. Dean remarks that being teased after a confession must have been quite embarrassing for him. Jean clarifies that it happened 3 separate times, with girls of different ages. Dean is utterly shocked, exclaiming that to be cursed 3 times is unbelievable. Retz thoughtfully suggests Jean's unique experiences have simply made him more self-aware. Jean knows the truth. His manipulative older sister was the true cause of all his problems. He remembers how his sister had clearly been behind all 3 incidents. using her friends. She had treated him like a possession and enjoyed teasing him, so he learned to feign indifference. Chris pats Jean's shoulder, observing that he seems to have cheered up. Jean thanks him. Adelheid remains silent, watching Jean with a deep, unreadable, and serious expression. The camera pans up through the dark trees to the starry night sky above the forest. Jean sits alone by the crackling campfire, sipping from a warm mug. He gazes into the darkness, thinking how chilly the nights have become, even in spring. The small bird spirit Az flutters down to land on his shoulder, and he greets it. A voice from off-panel announces that it is time to change the guard for the night watch. Adelheid approaches the campfire to relieve Jean from his watch duty. She offers him a Florentine cookie as a snack, thanking him for his many kindnesses. She shows off the new coat he gave her, remarking on how light and comfortable it is. She shyly explains she made the coat herself as repayment for the potion he gave her. Seeing his quiet expression, she worries that he didn't like the cookie she offered him. She softly tells him that he is a good man and deserves to be happy. Jean, surprised, thanks her and dismisses his past troubles as mere coincidence. He looks at her, realizing she is trying to offer him genuine comfort and encouragement. He says his distrust is improving because he's met good people, and she asks if it's true. Adelheid looks at him intently, saying she would be happy to be counted among those good people. A little flustered, Jean confirms that of course, she is one of them. He stands up to leave, telling her he will leave the rest of the watch to her. Adelheid nibbles her cookie, thinking that Jean's straightforwardness is both embarrassing and refreshing. She blushes, realizing he is the complete opposite of her own manipulative, two-faced sister. Jean smiles to himself, thinking that they should all get a good night's rest for tomorrow. Elsewhere, Retzi and Dean heartily eat roasted game, wishing they had strong liquor to go with it. Retz agrees, commenting that the food they're eating is better than what he gets in town. Several days later, the party sits around the campfire, still having not found their main quarry. Adelheid closes her eyes, identifying the special spiced wine by its name, Renovating. Note confirms her assessment, describing its notes of ripe berries, pepper, and spice. Jean looks on in surprise, having never heard of a wine named Ian before. Chris holds up a freshly baked roll, impressed that bread can be cooked in a pot. A bowl of warm bread sits next to a dish of liver paste, a simple camp meal. Jean reflects on the importance of getting enough iron and vitamins during a long journey. Chris points to Jean's strange conical tent, asking if he plans to sleep there. Jean clarifies that it's not for sleeping, but a makeshift steam bath he built. He explains to a curious Chris how he used branches to create a dome frame. Inside the tent, a fire heats a carefully arranged pile of smooth river stones. John demonstrates the process, ladling water onto the hot stones which hiss and create steam. Jean pours water over hot stones as Chris watches in amazement. He imagines how refreshing a jump in the river would be now. Chris calls out to him, and Jean turns to face the adventurer. With a flourish, Chris praises Jean's remarkable comfort in the wild. Jean offers to let him use the sauna, which Chris gratefully accepts. To Jean's surprise, the rest of the party has also gathered. He gestures, asking if everyone else wants to use the sauna too. The other party members enthusiastically agree to a relaxing bath. Later, Jean hangs a sheet to dry, noting their fun delayed things. As he walks from the river, a dark, viscous drop hits the ground. He finds himself in a clearing surrounded by small, dark spirits. He knows he must name them, but worries about being discovered. The morning sky is visible through the dense forest canopy above. The next day, the party continues their trek deeper into the woods. Dean feels great after the bath, as Chris notes their quickened pace. Suddenly, Dean's cheerful expression turns sharp and focused. He shouts for the others to wait as he rushes ahead of Jean. A massive three-horned lizard, an Isekai'd, blocks their path. Dean is shocked, having expected a two-horn at most in this area. Retzi quietly tells Jean to hold his position and wait for the signal. He explains their only chance to strike is when it lifts its head. Dean tells Chris they will split up, and Chris calmly agrees. With a firm step, Dean prepares to charge the powerful monster. Adelheid stands ready as the huge lizard lumbers through the forest. Dean grits his teeth, his expression one of pure determination. He slams his body into the creature, knocking it off balance. As the beast stumbles, Dean yells for Chris to make his move. Chris leaps forward instantly, his sword already descending in an arc. His blade finds its mark, plunging deep into the monster's throat. With a cool expression, Chris stands victorious over the fallen beast. Adelheid praises their magnificent teamwork, and Note agrees it was impressive. Retz reassures Jean, noting that he knows he is a cautious person. Jean thinks to himself that he never would have managed that alone. Retzi confirms with certainty that it was a three-horned Isekai'd. The other adventurer is shocked, as usually only one-horned beasts appear. Jean is stunned, wondering just how immense this forest truly is. Dean breathes a sigh of relief, stating their objective is now complete. Retzi suggests they make camp for the night, and Dean agrees. Chris turns to Jean, asking him to help butcher their prize. By the river, Jean and Retzi begin the grim task of dismantling the carcass. Retz looks on with admiration, complimenting Jean's butchering skills. Jean demurs, saying his self-taught style is just from hunting practice. He glances aside, his mind on the other strange thing he noticed. He sees that another, larger group of dark spirits has gathered nearby. He wonders if bigger spirits evolve into monsters with more horns. Jean asks Retzi how much lard they have left for cooking. Retzi says they have plenty, so Jean decides to gather some asparagus. Retz warns him not to wander too far from the safety of the fire. Jean finds some late winter mushrooms and garlic mustard plants. He decides to use his exploration skill one last time. His eye glows with power as he activates the skill, scanning the area. He is startled to sense a fox nearby, and it's approaching quickly. He realizes it's a two-horn, and it's heading straight for them. He knows he must warn Retzi about the incoming monster immediately. He runs back to camp, shouting that a fox monster is nearby. Retzi explains he used cedar leaves to try and mask their scent. He hands Jean a small jar of ointment to hide their smell. The fox appears in a blur, moving with incredible speed toward Jean. Retzi is surprised but thinks it's an easier fight than the Isekai'd. The fox's paws pound the earth as it rapidly closes the distance. Drool drips from the creature's maw as it prepares to strike. Retzi shouts Jean's name in warning as the fox looms over him. Jean draws his sword, preparing to face the massive beast alone. As the fox leaps, Retzi screams out Jean's name in alarm. Jean braces himself for the attack, his expression grim and determined. The fox suddenly collapses in front of him, letting out a soft whimper. Retzi stares in utter confusion at the bizarre turn of events. Dean is amazed, asking if Jean took down the two-horn by himself. Chris approaches, dramatically addressing Jean with a respectful title. He grabs Jean's hands, excitedly declaring him a rising star. Note and Adelheid simply express their relief that he is unharmed. Dean watches the twitching fox, still in awe of Jean's power. He admits he thought they were only supposed to be hunting lizards. He explains that lizards don't travel far, but foxes are different. Chris notes that a two-horn means a three-horn is likely nearby. Jean listens, understanding the dangerous implication of the fox's presence. Dean decides they shouldn't linger and will head back in the morning. That night, meatballs sizzle in a large pot over the campfire. Dean teases Jean, asking if he enjoyed the fried chicken that much. The party enjoys a hearty pasta dinner, remarking on its unique flavor. The sun shines brightly as they begin their journey home the next day. The group walks back through the forest without any further trouble. Chris and Dean walk together, vigilant and ready for anything. They finally arrive back at the stone gates of the town. A woman from the guild greets them, thanking them for their work. John groans inwardly, dreading the debriefing with the guild higher-ups. He quickly asks Adelheid and Note to collect his reward for him. He tells them to go home and get a hot bath ready for him. Dean looks confused, asking if Jean is leaving them already. He relents but insists Jean tell him all about the spirits later. Jean arrives back at the quiet street where his rented house stands. He sighs with exhaustion as he adds more logs to the fireplace. Small fire spirits and a salamander play happily in the hearth. He asks a fairy-like spirit to act as a messenger between his homes. Using his storage skill, he instantly fills the bathtub with hot water. He instructs the spirits to keep the bath warm for his friends. Activating his transference skill, he prepares to leave for his manor. He arrives in his true home and calls out for his companion, Rish. The small spirit wolf leaps joyfully into his waiting arms. He pets the happy wolf, suggesting a bath before they play. Adelheid soaks in the warm bath, letting out a quiet sigh of relief. Jun sits by the fire, thinking he needed to wash 3 times to get clean. A small, winged spirit flits into the room, and Jun thanks it for coming. He tells the spirit to wait as he uses his transference skill to teleport. He reappears in the bathroom, intending to drain the now lukewarm water. With a splash, fresh, steaming hot water refills the elegant, claw-footed tub. Jean greets Adelheid and Note, apologizing for the wait and inviting them inside. Note hands him a heavy pouch of money, which Jean accepts with thanks. He tells them the bath is ready, and Note expresses his gratitude for the preparations. Note, holding a wooden bucket, informs Adelheid that everything is now prepared for her. Jean is served a drink and some cheese toast, which he accepts with a word of thanks. He asks Note where he could have possibly found such a fine bathtub. Note explains it is a rare import that would take half a year to order. Jean worries the fine pottery might make them think he is of high birth. Note asks to buy the robe Jean lent Adelheid, but Jean says it was a gift. The butler's expression turns grave as he prepares to share his findings. He reveals that both he and Adelheid will be joining the subjugation party. Jean dreads another forest trip, while Note insists he can't accept the robe for free. Jean raises his hands, flustered, trying to refuse the pouch of money. Note's intense gaze is unyielding, forcing a nervous John to accept the payment. Adelheid emerges from her bath, her long hair damp, calling out for Note. Jean tells her to have tea while he readies the next bath, but she offers to help. He smiles, insisting she rest, as an attendant cannot let their master do such work. Note excuses himself, carrying a basket of used towels and other items. Jean brings a tray with drinks to Adelheid, telling her to take her time. He realizes this is the first time he has ever seen her with her hair down. Adelheid feels a strange tension as her bird spirit, Az, rests atop her head. Her mood suddenly darkens, her face settling into a familiar, brooding scowl. Jean notes that she looks like an assassin again and asks her what is wrong. She asks if he saw the spirits in the forest, and he confirms that he did. She says she hasn't seen spirits in that state since a court mage went berserk. She remembers a vision of Jean walking among the dark, corrupted spirits he found. Jean asks what it is normally like when people use magic, as he has rarely seen it. She explains that spirits willingly lend a small amount of their power through contracts. John realizes the melted, shadowy spirits he saw were being destroyed by forced magic. She confirms their dark forms are proof of their resentment, which corrupts those around them. He asks if the magic users themselves eventually become monsters, and she confirms they do. Jean thinks with a grim smile that his sister is becoming a demon lord, not a hero. Adelheid clarifies that proper magic use actually strengthens and stabilizes the spirits. She says that spirits will gladly lend their power if they are not forced. Her expression saddens as she says she's lucky Az was never corrupted and is still with her. She can't help but compare her own spirit to the tormented ones they witnessed. She asks John if the spirits he saw were corrupted by people. Jean abruptly stands and tells her to wait a moment, leaving her confused. He returns with a warm smile, announcing that he has returned. He asks her to keep it a secret from the butler as he presents a tray. The platter holds a beautiful assortment of cakes and pastries for her to enjoy. Adelheid stares at the unfamiliar desserts with a look of pure wonder. He admits he isn't sure if she will like them, but wanted her to try. He says that while she shouldn't forget the spirits, being depressed isn't healthy. Adelheid is touched by his kindness and gratefully accepts the offering. She takes a bite of a cream puff, and her face lights up with surprised delight. John offers her tea and asks if she is enjoying the sweets he brought. She takes a thoughtful bite of the strawberry shortcake with her fork. Her eyes widen as the delicious flavor registers, a look of pure bliss on her face. She says she has had apple tart before, but this is on a completely different level. Pointing to a strawberry, she asks him what the small red fruit is. He thinks about how worried he was serving unknown food to a noble lady. He smiles, thinking that while he is not good at comforting people, sweets seem to work. Adelheid agrees that she liked it, a happy and content smile on her face. She takes a serene sip of tea, her earlier melancholy now completely gone. She sighs in contentment, admitting she never realized she was such a simple person. Jean tells her that Az, her spirit, seems to be much happier now as well. Adelheid looks at Az with a gentle smile, asking the small bird if that is true. Jean watches the two of them, sharing in their quiet, happy moment. Outside the building, Note observes that his lady seems to be feeling much better. The scene shows the large timber frame building where they are staying. Jean, now in his traveling cloak, is stopped by the veteran adventurer, Retsa. Retz asks John if he could make him a bag, offering to pay for it. Jean notes that Dean and Chris have also requested bags from him. Retzi warns him that carrying anything too flashy is likely to get it stolen. While being measured, Retzi explains the upcoming quest is mandatory for silver rank adventurers. Jean wonders why they can't simply earn stars by taking on ordinary subjugation quests. Retzi explains that stars are like contributions, and those with bad reps can't earn them. This means they have no idea what kind of unsavory people will show up for the quest. A chart shows the adventurer ranks, with Jean and Adelheid at copper and Chris at silver. Jean learns Adelheid can join via Chris's recommendation, but he himself will not be going. Retz playfully grabs Jean, asking when the quest starts if he's so smug about it. Jean says it's in about a month, depending on when Amadeo arrives in town. Retzi confirms that Amadeo is a gold rank adventurer summoned by the guild for the quest. Jean is intrigued, hearing that Amadeo is a powerful mage he would like to see in action. Retzi says the guild believes Amadeo can handle any strong monsters that may appear. John asks another question, his curiosity piqued by the news about the powerful mage. Retzi leans in and reveals that Amadeo is also able to see spirits. That night, Jean ventures alone into the spirit-filled forest of monsters. He plans to hunt lizards and gather their hides to make bags for everyone. A small, dark, shadowy spirit floats towards him from the dark undergrowth. With practiced ease, Jean plucks the corrupted spirit right out of the air. He holds the small creature and calmly gives it a new name, Black 95. He releases the now stabilized spirit, resolving to catch them for Adelheide's peace of mind. He looks out at the glowing forest, knowing he is about to be very busy again. Jean walks through the town streets as the title for the new chapter is displayed. He meets with Adelheid and Note, apologizing for making them wait for him. He hands over the new bags he crafted, saying he has finished their request. Note worries about payment, but Jean casually tells him he can pay later. He reflects that his skill made the bags easy, but asks if it's too early for shopping. Adelheid confirms the quest is still a while off, but the number of outsiders is increasing. Jean realizes Retzi was right about the ill-mannered adventurers gathering in town. The scene shows a large timber-frame building against a clear dotted sky. Two thugs block their path, commenting on Jean's pretty face and demanding his money. Retzi asks Jean why he's being targeted, telling him to just deal with it. Suddenly, Retzi is sent flying backward by an invisible force, crying out in surprise. Chris looks over his shoulder, asking if Jean is all right, who simply acknowledges him. The flamboyant Chris tisks, annoyed that the others snuck in without an invitation. Standing over a defeated man, Jean notes his bravery. The man mutters about the black bear. The butler note suggests they all go to a nearby restaurant to celebrate their reunion. Several hands raise their wooden cups high, joining together in a hearty toast. Jean asks his companions what they've been doing since they last met. Retz explains he was helping Chris gather herbs, needing to escape for a while. He admits he can't judge, having left early himself. Jean then asks about Dean. Adelheid is surprised, asking if Dean is looking for a new place and moving out. Dean explains that since he left home, he's had his mother help with his sister Emil's chores. Jean listens intently, realizing the guild is training Dean to keep him away from his sister. Adelheid, as Ash, coolly states her purpose is bear hunting. Jean finds her unshakable. Holding his cup, Jean has a sudden realization about something he's been hearing. He tells Dean he feels like he's being called Black Bear. Dean confirms it's a fact. Adelheid remarks that Ash and Bear are a strong combination. Note adds Jean is often with her. Jean quietly thinks to himself that he would have much preferred the nickname Wolf. Chris swoons dramatically, agreeing that Bear doesn't suit Jean's elegant, iris-like beauty. Retzi takes a deep drink from his cup before adding his own thoughts to the matter. He proudly declares the name Wolf belongs to the feared Wolf King Valmoa. John repeats the name, Valmoa? Chris confirms he was a legendary adventurer. An image of the cloaked Valmoa appears as Dean explains he was the legend's disciple. Dean blushes, admitting his simple admiration for Valmoa was his reason to become an adventurer. Jean smiles, changing the subject as he holds up a book. He presents his friends with custom scabbards, thanking them for their help. Dean accepts his gift, curiously peering inside the new scabbard. He exclaims that the inside is lined with leather, questioning if it's worth the cost. Note offers payment, but Adelheid dismisses it, caring only for their safe return. She grandly promises a feast with a whole roasted cow. Jean is stunned by the offer. The others in the tavern excitedly ask if they can join the post-mission celebration. Jean raises his cup again, wishing everyone a safe return from the upcoming quest. The scene shifts to the tavern at night, smoke curling from its chimney into the starry sky. Jean's group prepares to leave, while Chris and Retzi decide to stay for another drink. Jean is surprised Retzi is heading the same way, who explains he rents a cheap room nearby. Retz complains about a big shot doing toilet renovations and driving up his rent. Jean turns away in shame, realizing he's the big shot, as Note and Adelheid stare. Note muses that the new toilets make old smells unbearable. Jean wonders if it's missionary work. The sun rises brilliantly over the distant mountains, heralding the start of a new day. In his manor, Jean wakes with a yawn as Rish sleeps peacefully in a nearby basket. He enjoys a quiet breakfast, deciding he'll head deep into the forest again today. With a shimmer of energy, Jean uses his transference skill to teleport into the woods. He finds a swarm of flickering black spirits, ready to begin his daily work of saving them. He begins the long process of bestowing names upon them, murmuring black over and over. He sighs, feeling he's made good progress. A single spirit floats near his hand. He knows the Subjugation Force will pass by soon and wants to witness Amadeo's magic. He decides to make a contract with a small forest fairy to act as his scout. With his plan set, he resolves to venture a little deeper into the woods for the day. He recalls a map from the gods showing a forest to the east where their power doesn't reach. Standing at the edge of the unknown territory, he steels himself and decides to go forward. The sound of heavy footfalls crushing the undergrowth signals a large creature approaching. A monstrous wild boar, its snout armed with 3 sharp horns, charges from the trees. Jean nimbly dodges the attack, identifying the creature as a 3-horned boar. He summons his decapitation sword, magical energy swirling around his outstretched hand. With a swift and decisive slash, he cleanly defeats the monstrous beast. He uses his storage skill, and the boar's massive carcass vanishes into thin air. As he turns, his eyes catch sight of some unusual plants growing nearby. He recognizes them as a type of wild asparagus and plans to cook them later. He happily plucks a few stalks, thinking he will share some with Ash and the others. As he crouches, a new presence makes him look up, wondering what it could be. A beautiful single-horned snow leopard, a Isekai'd, pads silently out of the forest. The mythical beast lets out a soft, plaintive sound, holding its paw to its mouth. Jean's eyes widen in absolute shock at the sight of the legendary creature. He stammers, trying to process what he's seeing, correctly identifying it as a Isekai'd. The creature makes another soft noise, clearly trying to communicate something to him. Jean watches the Isekai'd intently, trying to understand what it is trying to say. A voice suddenly echoes in his mind, telling him that the creature has a request. A majestic white stag appears, translating the Isekai'd's plea, "Help Majiru and form a contract." Jean is stunned as the second creature appears, acting as a translator for the first. He wonders what these creatures are, questioning if the Isekai'd is a spirit. The Isekai'd communicates that it is a holy beast, its horn pure and free of dark miasma. Jean asks about Majiru, and the white stag explains that Majiru is its dear friend. He deduces that Majiru must be turning into a black spirit, requiring his help. The creatures offer him a reward. They will create a sanctuary anywhere he desires. This sanctuary, they explain, will be a safe haven that repels all monsters and dark spirits. John realizes a base in the forest would be perfect for his work of naming spirits. He agrees to their terms and asks where to go. The Isekai'd instructs him to ride the deer. He hops onto the stag's back, gripping its antlers and announcing that he is ready. The stag's powerful hoof digs into the earth, preparing for an explosive start. Jean is thrown back by the sudden whiplash-inducing burst of speed. The world blurs past as Jean yells at the stag for starting so suddenly. He clings tight to the antlers, amazed and terrified by the incredible speed. The stag's hooves dig into the ground, coming to an immediate, jarring halt. Jean's momentum carries him forward, and he is thrown from the stag's back onto the grass. He sits up dizzy and annoyed, yelling at the creature for stopping without warning. The Isekai'd calmly informs him that Majiru, the spirit horse, has now arrived. A proud dark horse with a mane and tail of ethereal black fire steps into the clearing. The horse glares down at him, angrily demanding to know why a human was brought here. Jean observes the creature, confirming that this must be Majiru. He points out that the horse's corruption is advanced, its shoulder already dissolving into shadow. Looking the proud spirit in the eye, he asks for its name to begin the contract. He recalls the knowledge that named spirits grow stronger when they form new bonds. Majiru scoffs at the very idea, refusing to make a contract with a mere human. Jean ponders how to persuade the stubborn spirit, thinking magic circles may be needed. He decides against magic, instead opting for a much more direct approach. In a shocking display of strength, Jean lunges forward and tackles the massive horse to the ground. Pinning the stunned spirit, he calmly tells it not to be afraid and asks for its name. The Isekai'd covers its face with its paw, finding Jean's methods rather cruel. Majiru sweats, completely overwhelmed and terrified by the human's unexpected power. John kneels over the defeated spirit, gently but firmly repeating his question, "What is your name?" In the forest depths, Jean murmurs the name Majiru, preparing to forge a new contract. He stands alone amidst the dense foliage, repeating his intent to form a bond. His hand suddenly glows with a soft light as he gasps in surprise. Clutching his chest, he announces that his magic was drained, but the contract was a success. The majestic stag dryly remarks on his difficult struggle, much to the leopard's annoyance. Jean asks the spirits if they know of a beautiful place where their kind can gather. The white stag lowers its head, simply telling Jean to get on its back. The spirit horse Majiru comments on the human's boldness for daring to ride the stag. Mounted on the stag, Jean is surprised by how comfortable the ride actually is. Suddenly, the stag bursts into motion, leaving Jean clinging on in wide-eyed panic. The forest becomes a dizzying blur as they travel at an impossible speed. The ride ends abruptly, sending Jane tumbling face first into the undergrowth. He dusts himself off as the stag nonchalantly asks how he likes the new location. Looking around, John's face lights up. The clearing is far better than he imagined. The two mystical creatures announce that they will now create a protective barrier. The horned leopard closes its eyes, humming as it channels a powerful energy. A wave of shimmering magic flows outward, expanding to encompass the entire clearing. A vast, translucent dome now encloses the sanctuary, sealing it from the outside world. Jean worries that the barrier might prevent his new horse spirit from entering. The stag reassures him that his contract will allow Majoru to pass through freely. With their task complete, the spirits bid him farewell, and he thanks them for their help. In a brilliant flash of light, the two majestic guardians of the forest vanish. John is left alone in the serene quiet of his newly established haven. He pulls out his map, noticing a change that makes him pause in curiosity. He realizes with surprise that a new location has been added to the parchment. He wonders if the map now shows Majoru's range, not just places he has visited. A blush of pure joy spreads across his face as he imagines completing the map. Standing by the tranquil pool, he considers how to best utilize his new sanctuary. The scene shifts, introducing the bustling commercial city of Narufelt by the sea. Jean arrives in the city, planning to study its architecture for his own projects. He stops to admire an ornate window made of many circular glass panes. Focusing his gaze, he activates his powerful appraisal skill to learn more. His ability reveals the glasses of high quality with superior transparency. He compares it to the crude, bubbly glass he saw back in the town of Cassum. In a shop, he is impressed by the fine parchment and intricately carved boxes. He then marvels at a display of elegant dresses and sparkling accessories. He picks up a beautiful red goblet, deciding to buy it despite its likely cost. Entering an apothecary, he wonders about the level of medicine in this world. His eyes widen in shock as he spots a large bin filled with cacao beans. The shopkeeper calls it a medicine for youth, but John knows it must be bitter. The man explains that nobles enjoy it with milk and sugar, and its price is rising. Jean's face falls as he realizes just how incredibly expensive the beans are. Despite the shocking price, his desire for a taste of home wins out, and he buys some. He reflects that the beans require complex processing, making them even more valuable. He smiles, happy to be learning about the gourmet side of this new world. A voice calls out, gesturing towards the young man with the black hair. A distinguished elderly gentleman with a cane looks at him, remarking on his beauty. Jean is momentarily flustered, wondering if the old man is trying to flirt with him. He quickly composes himself, politely asking if the gentleman needs something. The man clarifies he was admiring Jean's backpack, a new model from the Ajir Guild. The old gentleman thoughtfully notes that the town of Ajir is quite far away. Jean thinks of the region's snowy mountains, musing he could make better gear himself. The man apologizes for stopping him and waves a friendly goodbye. Jean sweats, realizing this is the 10th time he's been approached by a stranger. He wishes a merchant would come to Cassum so he could promote his toilet design. Having seen the sights, he decides it is time to pursue his primary objective. He asks a woman in a general store what she has been looking for. He clarifies his own quest, explaining he is searching for a book about spirits. He specifies that he wants a rare text detailing how to capture spirits. A serious young man appears, stating that such books are not for public sale. He suggests that if such a book exists, it would be found here, but sold illicitly. Jean considers the possibility of finding the book in a shady antique shop. The old woman advises him that a proper bookstore is a more likely place to look. He politely asks her for directions to a bookstore that might have what he needs. He arrives at the shop, the chime of a small bell announcing his entrance. The clerk asks if he's looking for decorative books, offering two different kinds. The clerk explains that one type is merely a hollow box for storing trinkets. Jean clarifies that he wants a real, readable book that is also decorative. The clerk presents two tomes, one with blank pages, the other a prank book. He notes the blank book is more expensive because it can actually be used for writing. Jean narrows his eyes, activating his skill to see the magic within the books. He perceives a tiny fairy on the prank book, its text constantly rewriting itself. The little spirit seems startled as his hand gets closer to the book's cover. The clerk explains the prank book is written in a script only its owner can read. Jean understands its purpose is to keep secrets, particularly those of magic and curses. He thinks that deciphering such a text without the key would be incredibly difficult. He then realizes with a jolt that there must be a second book that pairs with it. He holds the two books together, correctly guessing that they are a matching set. The clerk warns him the set is expensive, but Jean cheerfully agrees to buy it. He thanks the clerk for his help and leaves the store with his valuable purchase. He is overjoyed, realizing the books are spirit-bound originals, not mere copies. With his mission accomplished and his money spent, he prepares to leave the city. That evening, he reads by the fire in his manor with his spirit wolf Rish sleeping nearby. He learns that the risks of spirit contracts are based on compatibility and magical power. The book explains that contracts allow one to summon spirits to places they don't belong. He considers the high energy cost of summoning a fire spirit to a snowy mountain. He muses that while spirits are everywhere, their individual natures vary greatly. He thinks of the goddesses Mishut and Haralfa, both light spirits, yet so different. He comically recalls the powerless orb of light, insisting its failure wasn't its fault. He reflects that he hasn't often listened to the requests of his own house spirits. The next morning, the sun rises, casting a warm light over his peaceful estate. A magnificent breakfast platter is laid out, piled high with meats and fresh croissants. Adelheid, his guest, eats with her eyes closed in a state of pure bliss. Her butler note agrees that a warm and delicious breakfast is a wonderful thing. Jean smiles, explaining he cooked all the perishables before they leave on their quest. He remarks that hot breakfasts are a rarity in this world of cold, simple meals. Note asks if Adelheid's noble household also forgoes cooking in the morning. Jean explains that most people work at sunrise, so conserving firewood is common practice. The meal is finished, and a clean plate signifies their complete satisfaction. Jean announces that it is nearly time to depart, asking his friends to wait a moment. Adelheid and her butler note, watch with confusion as Jean approaches them. He hands over a large, heavy bundle, which Adelheid accepts with some effort. Jean smiles, explaining it's heavy with supplies for Dean's party as well. With a final wave, he sends them off, and they depart with their thanks. Now alone, Jean announces his next task, procuring his own building materials. He carefully inspects a stack of sturdy, well-made bricks for his new project. He then thoughtfully examines several beautifully ornate patterned tiles. Jean discusses his plans and purchases with a friendly, blonde shopkeeper. Back at his manor, Rish happily announces he can join Jean in the new safe zone. The fluffy spirit wolf bounces around Jean's feet in a circle of pure joy. Jean scoops up the excited Rish, deciding to take him along as he teleports. They arrive in a sunlit meadow, his boots pressing into the soft, verdant grass. While holding Rish, Jean spots a tiny glowing spirit flitting through the air. But upon their arrival, all the nearby spirits suddenly scatter in a panic. Jean wonders why they fled, asking Rish if he was the one who startled them. He gently sets Rish down, assuring him it's safe to play inside the white line. It's time to begin, he thinks, pulling a shovel from his magical storage. He drives the shovel's blade deep into the earth, ready to start construction. He plans to build a small, two-story house right here in this clearing. He imagines a cozy second floor where he can relax after a long day. He will also create a large garden for Rish to play in while he works. He has already spent days gathering plaster, wood, and bricks for the fireplace. After some hard work, he leans on his shovel and decides to take a break. He smiles, calling out to Rish, who is happily exploring the new space. Rish eagerly laps up some cool water from a bowl Jun has provided. For lunch, Jean has prepared a delicious-looking bagel sandwich for himself. He sits at a small rustic table, enjoying his meal in the peaceful clearing. Rish, meanwhile, has found a sturdy stick and sniffs it with great interest. He settles down to chew on his prize, completely content with his find. Jun muses about planting a vibrant garden and building a coffee siphon. His quiet lunch is suddenly interrupted by the arrival of an unexpected guest. A magnificent horned snow leopard, a Yuki hue, pads silently into view. It is soon followed by a majestic white stag with impressive silvery antlers. Then a powerful dark-maned horse joins the procession of magical beasts. Jean is completely startled by the sudden appearance of the third creature. The three animals stare with solemn intensity, their gazes fixed on Rish. A voice echoes in Jean's mind, wondering why the great Lord Rish is here. Jean almost chokes, stunned to hear his small companion addressed with such reverence. The creatures stand in awe, questioning how their lord came to be in this place. Lord Rish, Jun repeats aloud, his mind reeling with confusion. The animals recall their lord vanishing 5 years ago after a failed summoning. Jun connects their story to his own arrival, the timeline matching perfectly. He turns to his companion and asks, Rish, were you the Yuki Hughes boss? Rish simply tilts his head, the stick in his mouth, looking utterly clueless. Jun realizes Rish either has amnesia or simply doesn't care, and drops it. He is still amazed that Rish is somehow acquainted with these powerful beings. Looking at the pristine wilderness, he wonders if this forest was Rish's old home. As Rish chews on his coat, Jean agrees that a forest suits a wolf. The stag continues its praise, declaring Rish more powerful than any other spirit. The horse adds that Rish is also more free than any of his kind. The Yuki-Hue finishes, stating that Rish's voice can reach the world's end. Jean notes with some annoyance that the Yuki-Hue has been praising Rish non-stop. He tries to get back to work, but the creatures mention a title. He is puzzled to hear them refer to Rish as the Apostle of the Wind. Rish, having found a measuring tape, presents it to Jean with pride. Jean thinks back on what the creatures said about past events. He knows his own house is protected by a barrier, isolating it from the world. He wonders if Rish's title is connected to the forest location. He asks the creatures to explain what they mean by Apostle of the Wind. The stag explains that Rish was involved with the previous generation's hero. Jean grows angry, assuming the former hero must have damaged the forest. The stag clarifies that the hero created a vessel that could run on water. Jean realizes they mean a ship, a gift given to the city of Narufelt. He suddenly worries that Rish might hate him for using similar powers. He crouches down, feeling dejected and anxious about Rish's potential judgment. But Rish simply rolls over, demanding a belly rub and dispelling his fears. The creatures explain that the forest has not yet returned to its western home. Jean reflects on how humans can only live safely within towns and villages. Stepping into the forest means entering the dangerous realm of spirits and monsters. He knows that humans expand by clearing forests and building ships. The horse notes that the current summoner is far from being a spirit of light. It thanks Rish, explaining that because of him, it avoided falling into ruin. Jean explains he received this land in exchange for helping two of them. He recalls being warned that a troublesome being was at this location. A beautiful woman appears, saying the hero is weak but protected. Jean assures her he will stay away, as Rish affectionately licks his hand. He doesn't regret powering up his pantry, but knows he needs to store more magic. His divine gifts make him a good cook, but he knows he must learn to fight. He asks Rish if he lost his memories when he lost most of his power. He muses that the range of his contract with the gods is quite limited. The Yuki-Hue admits that it does not know the full details of Rish's past. The stag, with tears in its eyes, declares that Lord Rish is great and merciful. Overwhelmed, Jean holds up a hand, telling them he understands and to please stop. Back in the comfort of his manor, he gets ready to enjoy a nice meal. He puts his hands together in thanks before a delicious spread of food. He happily slurps his noodles, savoring the rich and wonderful flavor. He thinks about continuing his construction and farming projects in the sanctuary. He plans to use his appraisal skill to find new seeds for his garden. He realizes that with his knowledge, he might even be able to breed new plants. He looks forward to the day he can eat a delicious meal at a restaurant. He finishes his meal, grateful that his body was enhanced before he arrived here. The twin mountain peaks stand majestically under a bright, clear sun. Back at his construction site, Jean breaks stones with a heavy mallet. He kneels down, carefully smoothing the earth to prepare the foundation. At night, he names a small dark spirit, surrounded by a swirl of magical lights. He walks through his growing fields, reflecting on his steady progress. He knows the spirits will help the vegetables he got from his pantry grow. He lists the plants he's cultivating, looking forward to the eventual harvest. He briefly wonders how Adelheide's Subjugation Force is doing, but isn't worried. Holding up a rope, he calls out, "Let's go, Rish," ready for the next task. Jean playfully tosses a knotted rope toy for his spirit companion, Rish. Rish leaps and expertly catches the toy midair with a triumphant snap. The proud little wolf spirit trots back with his prize, looking very pleased. Jean laughs, affectionately ruffling Rish's fur and praising his impressive catch. He tells the curious Rish that it's time to go back inside now. There's a new and special experiment he has been wanting to try. In his workshop, he announces his plan to create a magic circle. Following the book, he grinds herbs and minerals with a pestle. He dissolves the powder into spirit-infused water, creating a special ink. With his materials ready, he prepares to begin the intricate magical drawing. He carefully fills a delicate ruling pen with the newly created ink. Using a compass, he draws the complex geometric pattern from the book. He then adds symbols from a second grimoire, combining the instructions. He wonders aloud which type of spirit he should attempt to summon first. A tiny winged earth fairy pops out of the circle with a cheer. A cheerful, gelatinous water slime jiggles happily into existence right after. Two fiery salamanders then scurry out, chasing each other around the circle. Jean cries out in frustration, telling them not to just burst out. He shoos them away, worried they will ruin his carefully drawn parchment. He pauses, trying to figure out what he should do about the chaos. He decides to try summoning a different element, ice. Rish suddenly pops up in front of him with a happy, panting expression. Jean has a sudden realization, remembering that Rish is an ice spirit. He asks Rish if he could help him make ice cream sometime soon. Jean declares that this time, he will decide on the spirit beforehand. He decides that since he has made a field, he will summon harvest. He draws the symbol for the goddess of harvest, pouring in magic. A gentle puff of smoke erupts from the completed magic circle. A kindly old woman appears, introducing herself to him as Val. She explains that she presides over the earth and its abundant harvest. Jean stammers, acknowledging that he already knew who she was. He panics, wondering if this is a prank or if he summoned a god. His eyes widen in shock as the ink on the circle begins to sizzle. A hand points at the vanishing circle, and Jean turns around, confused. He is shocked to see the god Vafan standing right behind him. Vafan gestures as the last of the magical ink completely disappears. Jean explains he followed the book's instructions, but the circle vanished. Vafan says the book is wrong, as Gakkel explains the ink's limitations. A soft, ethereal laugh suddenly echoes through the small workshop. Haralfa appears, telling Jean he seems to be having a lot of fun. The goddess smiles warmly, saying that watching him brings her joy. Jean throws up his hands, asking when they all arrived without him noticing. Haralfa explains that the room is full of tiny, pleasant spirits. She closes her eyes, remarking on how comfortable the atmosphere is. Rordale explains these spirits are born in the morning and gone by evening. The entire pantheon has assembled, much to Jean's utter surprise. Rordale tells him he should have just asked them about summoning spirits. Jean asks if they'll teach him, wondering if this is an aftercare session. Vafan, looking bored, decides a sparring match is in order instead. The scene shifts to a sun-dappled clearing outside in the forest. Vafan stands ready, inviting Jean to begin their training duel. Jean charges forward, launching himself into a swift attack against the god. He grips his sword tightly, his expression a mask of pure determination. Vafan effortlessly blocks the attack with just one hand, stopping the blade. The force of the impact sends Jean stumbling backward with a cry. He lands hard on the ground, wincing in pain from the fall. Vafan looks down, commenting that Jean's movements have gotten worse. Jean looks up confused, asking what the god means by that. He explains that he tried to incorporate the styles of his adventurer friends. Jean realizes with a blush his movements have become uncoordinated and messy. He admits he was just copying others, not making the style his own. Vafan asks what happened to his sword image, saying it was better before. Jean closes his eyes, searching for his fundamental image of swordsmanship. He remembers watching flashy fantasy films and grounded samurai dramas. He realizes that the samurai dramas left a much deeper impression on him. He thinks that his current sword is more suited for a fantasy RPG hero. A revelation strikes him. The style of the sword itself is the problem. His ornate decapitation sword floats before him as he ponders this. He looks up, his expression one of sudden, wide-eyed understanding. Vafan materializes a new blade, exclaiming that it's a Japanese sword. The beautiful katana floats into Jean's waiting hands, shimmering with power. He notes its fantasy-style silver chain instead of a traditional sajo cord. Vafan stands with arms crossed, remarking that it's an unusual design. Jean agrees, stating that this is a sword from his homeland. He places his thumb on the tsuba, preparing to draw the blade. With a swift motion, he draws the katana, settling into a ready stance. Dark energy coils around the blade as he swings it with new confidence. Vafan asks if he is ready to continue their training session. Jean's face is alight with determination as he asks Vafan to proceed. The spar resumes with a clash of steel ringing through the clearing. Their blades meet again, Jean's focus now sharp and unwavering. He leaps into the air, bringing his katana down in a powerful strike. Vafan effortlessly parries the blow, his expression calm and controlled. Jean thinks that the flashy effects of fantasy films were just confusing. Now, with an image he understands, fighting is easier and more fun. Vafan praises his improvement, and Jean thanks him, glowing with pride. Jean knows the sword can't harm its creator, letting him fight freely. His training done, he wonders if he might one day surpass Vafan. Rish bounds over, showering him with affectionate licks on the cheek. Mishit and Haralfa appear, congratulating him on his hard work. Jean finds himself surrounded by the two beautiful goddesses, feeling flustered. Back in the workshop, Vafan calls his name, holding out a book. Vafan explains that the interpretation in Jean's original book is wrong. He advises Jean to go to a temple in Termist in 7 days. Termist is an island south of the Kavil Peninsula, a new destination. Vafan promises to arrange for him to get the correct book there. Jean realizes he'll need to save money to buy the book in a week. He walks past a hooded figure, thinking he planted a lot of things. Rows of young, healthy seedlings grow in a tilled field. Jean looks back with a nervous smile, a sense of unease creeping in. Jean recalled Rourdea's words about the unique tastes of humanoid spirits. The young god was fascinated by this world's crops, as was Jean. Jean's own meals had evolved from survival fare to sophisticated salads. He arrived in the grand bustling commercial city of Narufelt. An ornate sign hanging from a building spoke of the city's elegance. He sat alone at a terrace restaurant, enjoying the view of the sea. Before him was a lavish meal of steak, pâté, and rich pasta. He savored the delicious truffle pasta, impressed by the city's advanced cuisine. A merchant happily informed him that his monster pelts would sell well here. With his finances now secure, he considered what he should do next. He browsed a weaponsmith shop, looking at the various swords for sale. He mused that he couldn't find a sword like his own decapitation sword. He spotted a curved blade, thinking it was the closest he'd find. The shopkeeper then offered to show him the spirit weapons he kept. These, the smith explained, were weapons made by or inhabited by spirits. Jean realized his own sword must be a spirit weapon, crafted by Vafan. The smith said such weapons need a comfortable place, not just magical storage. Thanking the man, Jean left with a new understanding of his divine blade. Back in his room, he prepared for his daily scrying ritual. He stood over a basin of water, ready to observe the adventurers. The water swirled, and an image of the subjugation party began to form. Watching the subjugation team has become part of his daily routine. Sipping tea, he recognized them as Amadeo's famous gold rank party. He had asked nearby spirits for help, making the vision remarkably clear. He watched the warrior, wondering why two women were accompanying him. Snacking on a walnut, he noted the warrior also had other followers. He could sense that these three adventurers were particularly special. He identified the cloaked woman as a mage with a light spirit. The archer likely had a wind and green spirit, given her vine-like bow. He was amused to see the warrior's spirit look just like a prairie dog. He wondered where a prairie dog could have possibly come from in this world. His thoughts drifted to his own friends, wondering where Ash's party was. The vision showed Chris's group of 5 trekking through the forest. Adelheid pointed out the spirits she could see accompanying Chris and Dean. John remembered his own spirit's strange reaction to the smell of Dean's boots. He also recalled how his spirit had swooned over Retz's impressive beard. He silently begged his spirit not to develop any more weird preferences. He noted the gold-rank spirits were large, unlike his own small dark ones. In his vision, the warrior was now facing a large lizard monster. The warrior grinned, rushing forward with his sword to meet the beast. The mage calmly gestured, preparing a powerful spell to end the fight. With a whispered incantation, she focused her immense magical power. A brilliant flash of light erupted from her staff, striking the creature. The lizard was killed instantly, its body slumping lifelessly to the ground. June was amazed, wondering at the incredible power of the spirit's magic. But then he saw something was wrong with one of the team members. A man in armor drew his sword, his face cold and expressionless. He began to follow the archer as she walked away from the others. Suddenly, he raised his sword high, preparing to strike her from behind. The blade sliced through the air with silent, murderous intent. The archer spun around, deflecting the sudden attack with her dagger. They were locked in a desperate struggle, her former comrade now an enemy. Jean was impressed. The archer was skilled in close-quarters combat. He could see the man was possessed, his eyes shadowed and empty. A small, malevolent black spirit was clinging tightly to the man's chest. The spirit launched itself from the man, flying towards the archer. It returned to its host, who now seemed to be much weaker. The spirit lunged at the archer again, a blur of dark energy. It was thrown back, repelled by some kind of invisible barrier. The archer was shocked, realizing the attack had been deflected. The dark spirit flew back to its original host, who was now faltering. John understood that a spirit needs a vessel to maintain its power. The archer knew her ally was possessed, but she couldn't see the spirit. John watched intently, waiting to see what her next move would be. He found himself wondering how one is supposed to defeat a dark spirit. A spirit weapon could kill a possessed person, but that seemed wrong. With grim resolve, the archer drew her vine-covered spirit bow. John realized with horror that she intended to kill the vessel itself. The man screamed as the arrow hit, dark energy exploding from the wound. Jean was shaken, realizing just how cheap life was in this world. He understood that death was a much more common occurrence here. He slapped his cheeks, forcing himself to calm down and focus. Taking a deep breath, he turned his attention back to the basin. He recalled that spirits are intangible unless their vessel is attacked. He wondered why the archer hadn't attacked when the spirit was exposed. Just then, an adventurer from another party stumbled upon the scene. The man stared in shock at the body of his fallen comrade. He rushed toward the corpse, completely unaware of the lurking danger. John realized with a pang of sadness that they must have been allies. The dark spirit emerged from the dead man, sensing a new host. It burrowed into the chest of the newcomer, who cried out in pain. The archer and the man exchanged panicked words, neither understanding. She realized with dread that the archer was unable to see the black spirit. John knew spirit sight varied. Some saw auras while others saw nothing. The newly possessed man clutched his chest, feeling the spirit take hold. He wondered if his own body was being pushed out by the invader. The warrior asked the mage if she could see the other two party members. John remembered Retzi saying Amadeo could see spirits inside people. He wondered what this strange, half-possessed state could possibly mean. It wasn't his responsibility, but he knew things that could solve this. With Ash and his friends nearby, he felt he had to do something. He made his decision with a firm internal, "All right." He turned to his own shadow and light spirits, preparing to act. He asked them to darken his face and lift him into the air. He also instructed them to hold up his hood without using his feet. With a confident smile, he finalized his mysterious, magical disguise. The adventurer stood over the body, unaware of a new presence. The warrior demanded to know what had just happened, his voice filled with confusion. The archer admitted she didn't know, only that the man had attacked suddenly. She apologized for what she'd done, her face a mask of shock and regret. An archer and a hooded figure stood back to back, ready for a fight. The adventurers demanded to know who the mysterious newcomer was and where he came from. John simply smiled, saying they wouldn't understand even if he gave his name. Adelheid recognized her friends, relieved her secret identity as a woman remained safe. Surrounded by lights, Jane asked the spirits of sound to keep his voice low. He pointed at a young man, declaring his business was only with him. Me? The young adventurer stammered, completely bewildered by the sudden attention. As Jean reached out, the man felt a strange sensation of fingers passing into him. Jean dismissed the odd feeling, telling himself it was just his imagination. He swiftly covered the man's eyes, pulling a dark spirit from his chest. The adventurer stared in horror, recognizing the creature as a weeping spirit. The other party members, a warrior and a woman, looked on in utter shock. The woman wondered aloud if the young adventurer had been possessed. She noted, however, that the unconscious man on the ground had been acting strangely. Jean observed the man, who was staring at his own hands in confusion. He glanced at the fallen warrior, relieved to see the man was still alive. Jean knelt beside the unconscious adventurer, preparing to offer his aid. He activated his healing skill, his hands glowing with a soft, restorative light. The injured man groaned softly, beginning to stir from his deep unconsciousness. His eyes fluttered open as the powerful healing magic took hold. A companion stared in disbelief, asking if the man had truly woken up. The group gathered as the healed warrior sat up, calling it a miracle. Jean watched with a gentle smile, simply happy that he could help. The woman was amazed, unable to believe he recovered from such a state. She confronted Jean, demanding to know who and what he really was. Her gaze narrowed as she questioned him about the spirits swirling around them. Jean mused that he usually asked the spirits to hide, but they helped today. He looked at the woman, realizing that she could definitely see them. She asked with suspicion if he had just picked these spirits up somewhere. Jean understood the first man's possession had drawn his attention to them. He let out a soft sigh as the others stared at his cloaked back. Adelheid felt her brother's intense gaze, hoping he hadn't seen through her disguise. The burly adventurer called out for Jean to wait as he started to leave. Jean activated his transference magic, his form dissolving into particles of light. He vanished from the clearing in an instant, leaving them all behind. Reappearing elsewhere, he held the captured spirit, hoping one problem was now solved. He decided to release this large, dark spirit deep within the forest. He recalled another powerful spirit, a black horse that had retained its will. He knew these dark spirits caused great pain by preying on others. He had forbidden the spirits under his contract from feeding on each other. He smiled at the small creature in his hands, deciding it was time to go home. He looked toward the distant roof of his manor under a starry sky. Back home, he thanked the small, fairy-like spirits for lending him their power. He stood over a bowl, wondering what had transpired after he left the adventurers. The scene briefly flashed back to the clearing where the group remained. He imagined them bowing deeply to the ground in a gesture of profound apology. He smiled wryly, thinking they were apologizing even though he was nearly killed. He considered that he was possessed and had been targeted by the archer. He decided he would ask Adelheid what happened when he next saw her. The scene changed to the peaceful, rustic home of the Dionisio family. Shivas cried out as his younger siblings gleefully tried to loosen up him. Jean arrived, telling Shivas to just let them peel his clothes off. The younger children eagerly asked if they could help, and Jean agreed. The twins cheered, pouncing on their older brother with mischievous glee. Shiva's clothes went flying as the guy happily stripped them from his body. The mother appeared with a fresh change of clothes for her now shirtless son. She explained their clothes get dirty and Jean offered to wash everything. Shiva's was mortified, complaining that John had to see him like this. His mother ignored him, cheerfully telling him to wash up at the well. John waved as Shiva's yelled at his mother not to involve their guest. With his hair tied back, John rolled up his sleeves, ready to work. He thought about his studies and the unbearable lack of sanitation in this world. He pictured the filth on the roads washing into houses on rainy days. He grimaced, thinking about cleaning horse dung and trying to make it into fuel. He recalled how other farmers he'd met simply slept on hay in their barns. He knew people here lived for the moment, as tomorrow was never certain. He felt he couldn't change the world, but he could help his friends. He began sweeping, determined to give the kind Dionisio family a clean home. The afternoon sky shone down upon the transformed and tidy farmstead. The family returned to find their home sparkling, especially the refurbished oven. Shiva stared in awe, asking if Jean was some kind of cleaning genius. Everyone praised his beautiful work, as Jean said the well was all that remained. Shiva's offered to make tea for Jean, who gratefully accepted the offer. The mother then asked Jean to fetch some quail and eggs for dinner. The youngest children shot their hands up, eagerly volunteering for the task. Later, a friend asked Jane if he actually had a passion for cleaning. Jean bluntly replied that he hated cleaning, much to his friend's confusion. He explained he simply can't stand unsanitary places, so he has to clean them. The mother arrived with dinner, winking that Jean just likes things beautiful. She placed a large steaming bowl of roasted quail and leeks on the table. Jean recognized it as Shiva's specialty and remarked that it looked delicious. He used his appraisal skill, thinking the leeks looked especially flavorful. The skill confirmed the recipe, which he mentally saved for his own use. The mother smiled warmly, inviting everyone to begin their meal. The family joined their hands, offering thanks for the warm meal they shared. Jean looked on with a soft smile, thinking they were his ideal family. He wondered if he too would one day have such a warm family. He quickly shook the thought away, blushing slightly as he took a bite. The scene shifted to the sun-bleached ruins of Termist Island's coast. Jean considered visiting the temple before spending his money on local crafts. He remembered that the god Rorde had recommended this specific temple to him. He walked toward the impressive stone building, its steeple reaching for the sky. Inside, he was met by a serene elderly man with a long white beard. Jean politely raised a hand, asking the old man about a certain book. The man recognized Jean's black hair and purple eyes from the god's prophecy. He confirmed that he was told Jean would be coming to the temple. The old man closed his eyes, saying he had received a message for him. Jean looked puzzled, wondering aloud what kind of message he could have received. He thought it was strange to call it a message when delivered in person. He was then seen handing a book to a woman, his task now complete. With a gentle smile, Jean confirms that he understands the situation. The ancient god Gakle gestures for him to follow down the corridor. Their boots make a rhythmic clacking sound on the polished stone floor. Jean stops suddenly, his gaze caught by something unexpected ahead of them. They stand together in a vast sunlit hall, pausing in their tracks. Before them, a life-size stone statue of a robed figure stands silently. He wonders if this sorrowful, mature statue could be the god Rorde. Gal gravely explains that he must swear an oath of absolute silence. A vision of a young Rorde flashes, his voice promising to swear. His business concluded, Gakle turns his attention to an ornate wall mirror. He presses his hand to the glass, which shimmers with a soft light. His hand passes smoothly through the mirror's surface as if it were water. Jean stares in disbelief, realizing it must be some kind of hidden door. A single flickering candle emerges from the inky darkness of the passage. A robed figure with a shadowed face steps through, holding the light. Jean is utterly stunned by the sudden appearance of this secret keeper.